Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and we have more Vikings injury report stuff to go over. We got some comments from Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson, and we have a good friend of mine, Joe Goodberry, who covers the Cincinnati Bengals for the Bengals on the Brain YouTube channel. He is coming up in just a little bit here. And then later on this evening at 7:30, Manny Hill joins, and we are going to talk about what makes a successful season for the Vikings, trying to project and predict what happens from here. And Manny is making a list of his favorite Bengals. So feel free to throw some random Bengals players into the chat. As always, the show, Purple Insider, presented by FanDuel. And our FanDuel question of the day for tonight is Justin Jefferson's over-under for this game, 72.5 yards. How many yards do you think he should end up with if the offense works well against the Cincinnati Bengals? So how many yards will Justin Jefferson get if I told you, hey, it worked out, the offense was great, and off we go? How many yards would you think that would mean for Justin Jefferson? Again, FanDuel over-under is 72.5. But as has been the style recently, we got to start out with this injury report on the Viking side. So Christian Darrisaw did not practice today. Now, what we were told is that Darrisaw is going to have, during this season, playing or not playing, he is going to have off days. He's going to have rest days that are built into his recovery schedule as part of his overall bigger picture recovery from his ACL surgery last year. So this is one of those days that it's not necessarily an indicator of whether he is going to play on Sunday or not. If I had to guess, I'd say it's a pretty good chance that Mr. Darrisaw ends up being listed as questionable. We will wait and find that out, but we were told that he is going to practice in full on Friday. Could be a good sign for the possibility of Darrisaw returning with 2 full practices this week. He's had a couple before, but I'm guessing that we just remain on Darrisaw watch. But when you first see did not practice, you're like, what the heck? Why was he out of practice? Did he have a setback? No, it's going to be built into his schedule, as you'll see for many players throughout the season who have different nagging injuries and things like that, will have veteran days or recovery days where they do not participate in practice, especially guys who have been around, guys who are very talented like Darrisaw. But this one does set off a little more alarm bells if you don't have that information. So that's important to bring up. Now, the alarm bells should definitely be going off about Ryan Kelly. Did not practice for the second straight day, presumably still in the concussion protocol, which means it is becoming very unlikely that he plays. Maybe we'll get a Friday surprise tomorrow and they'll say, actually, he's off the concussion protocol. But I think that you would rather Ryan Kelly be 100% long-term for the rest of this season, get fully healed, and then get back out there and not jump out there too early and end up having another concussion. I think we have enough information over the years to know this pretty clearly, that if you've had one, it's easier to get the next one. And that happened to Christian Darrisaw a few years ago when he got hurt against Buffalo in 2022. They played him the very next week, got hurt again, and you don't want to see that from Ryan Kelly, especially when he's had a couple of concussions before in his career. So he was not practicing today. Justin School still out. Would not expect him to be able to get back. Clearly, J.J. McCarthy was not practicing today with the ankle injury. And Grenard was a full go. Okudah was a full go. So I expect that Jeff Okudah is going to be back and could actually play a big role in this game, because this Cincinnati team likes to use 3 wide receivers. They're going to try to get the ball into the hands of their playmakers pretty quick, things like that. So I think he's going to, as a tackler, potentially have more value in this game than maybe he had in week 1 against the Chicago Bears. So he was a full go. Andrew Van Ginkel, though, still limited, which leaves it up in the air. If he practices in full on Friday, then I would expect him to play. But the fact that he hasn't had a full practice yet coming back from the concussion, still a question mark as of Thursday. Right now, the fact that Harrison Smith has still not had a single full practice that also leaves it up in the air whether he will be ready. Maybe they don't want him to have a full practice before he gets out there, but you would think that he would have at least one before he's ready to go. And this is something that we need to mention with the defense, that not having Harrison Smith, even though I think, the defense overall, has it been a huge problem? No. I mean, maybe not quite as dominating as we would have expected it, but they can't do certain things when Harrison Smith is not out there, because it has to do with his instinct, with his preparation, with his ability to identify different tells that the offense has, different ways they motion, different ways they line up, tendencies, and make very quick adjustments. And the way Brian Flores put it with that was that he could do some of these things that no one else would be able to do except for a couple guys in the league with this scheme. So they could use him back, but still limited in practice. And then a number of other players, Donovan Jackson with a wrist issue is something to watch. Josh Oliver still limited as well with that ankle. Again, his snap count is something to watch, because I think they would have used him a lot more had he not been banged up. So maybe not the most glowing on the Vikings side injury report. On Cincinnati's, though, something showed up today that took me by surprise a little bit and could be significant in this game. And that is Cam Taylor Britt, who has a hamstring injury. He was limited in his first practice this week, but he did not practice today, which makes you think that there was possibly some type of regression with Cam Taylor Britt. And this is a guy as their corner who's not a household name, but he has played 93 coverage snaps. That's the third most on the Cincinnati defense. He is a starting corner for them, played over 1,000 snaps last season, and not a superstar, but you're talking, if he's out with an injury, getting down to the next corner for them, which is Josh Newton, who I'm just not familiar with really at all. A 5th round draft pick in 2024, has played 500 snaps last year, didn't do so well. So their depth could be tested here for Cincinnati in a game where the Vikings are going to want to throw the ball. They're going to want to get the ball to Justin Jefferson. They're going to want to get some favorable matchups. So Cam Taylor Britt, one of their top corners, on the shelf with a hamstring injury as of today. And that could impact how Cincinnati tries to play defense, just like it did for Chicago a little bit. And how, their backup ended up with a pick 6. But you don't expect that on a week-to-week basis from the backup corners. We know this here, that cornerback depth is not an easy thing to come across. So that one will be worth watching on Friday's report. Now let's get to some of the things that were said out at TCO Performance Center, and then your questions. We'll take it up to right before 7 o'clock, because I have a radio appearance. So I'm going to be on 2 places at once with Henry Lake at WCCO Radio, but I've got an interview from earlier today to bring you, and then Manny Hill will join back again live to continue answering your questions, having a good conversation then. So that's kind of the schedule for this evening. But let's get to what was said earlier today at TCO Performance Center by Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. So I asked TJ Hawkinson about the underneath passing, because I see, even when I just logged in here, the first question, because of the headline, is about the quick passing, was why weren't they doing it before? The answer is that they were. They were calling quick plays, and McCarthy did throw a fair number of quick passes. It just didn't work. Whether that was some details that you can spot on the film, or whether that was McCarthy's lack of execution, the quick game has been a major issue. And Wes Phillips did say that that's something that they're really focused on. So I asked TJ Hawkinson about the underneath game and how they can get that going. TJ, what's the key to getting some of the underneath stuff going for you guys?
Obviously, I think, the last couple games is, underneath it have been tough. We've had some things go on, and I think, it's just rhythm and timing. That's really all it is. When you're talking, shorter routes and things like that, you got to get the ball out. You got to be where you're at, when you're supposed to be there. You got to make decisions fast. You got to do a lot of different things, and that just comes with, time and doing things. And so I think we'll get that going. I think I have no worries. JJ has done that all offseason, been able to get things rolling, and I think we've been trying to take some shots, and obviously we're just one play away, all 11 doing their job, and really that's what it comes down to in football, is just being all 11 doing their job at the same time, and it really just takes one play, and you just don't know what play it is. That's the beauty about football, is you never know which play, and that's why you got to do it every single one. So I think we'll get that rolling. I'm not too worried about it. My job is my job, and I'm gonna try to do it as best as I can, as often as I can.
Two things I thought were interesting there from what TJ Hawkinson said, which was, he said it's a rhythm and timing type of offense. And I think we could all say pretty clearly that the rhythm has not been there, nor has the timing, whether that was because of wrong routes or whether it was issues with the quarterback not seeing where he was supposed to go with the ball, the lack of anticipation, the blocking. There's lots of different factors, but it clearly has not worked. And when you hear the rhythm and timing part, you're saying to yourself, well, that has been an issue starting with the quarterback. And then the other part that stood out was when Hawkinson said JJ McCarthy was able to do that during the summer. They've played 2 football games. And it is very true that during the summer, I thought the quick game looked fine. He was getting the ball to Hawkinson a lot. He was getting the ball, especially to Jordan Addison, and not having him has been, I think, a major factor in this and why they haven't been as successful when they've gotten into the season. But the fact that you have to go back and you can't say, hey, McCarthy's done, a really good job and we've got to help him out. It's more of like, well, he did it in the summer. So, and, not that I'm saying Hawkinson was sort of low key throwing him under the bus or something. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that was in there as, I think we can do it. And he was doing it before, but then we just didn't get it out of him. And I think it's a pretty easy conclusion to come to that. And look, I've watched both games through. I've seen the other mistakes by the other players. I've seen the blocking mistakes and all of that stuff. But the quarterback is where it all begins, and getting it out of his hands is where it all begins. And when he's saying in timing and back in the summer and things like that, it's kind of clear that we know the issue here of not being able to get the football out with the quick game. So there's more indications of that from Justin Jefferson's comments. And again, I don't want to make this sound like either of these veteran players was taking shots at McCarthy. They were absolutely not. And you'll hear Jefferson, mention like, hey, I'm not saying anything bad about JJ here, but there was almost a little feeling in the commentary today of sort of relief that someone is playing quarterback who's played quarterback before in the NFL. And you'll kind of hear that a little bit with some of the things Justin Jefferson said.
He just has the experience, just going out there and being able to really, run the show. Coach like to call him the point guard because he's been in the game for a little while now. Of course, him doing the things that he have already done. This is just another game to him. And then, of course, him being able to be in practice last week and have a couple reps with the ones last week, it's really just another day out there with just another quarterback. I don't feel like we missed a beat. Of course, it's the next man up. But we feel confident in anybody that goes out there, especially with the guys that we have out there on that field.
TJ said that right now he's just working on building chemistry with Carson as quickly as possible. What does that look like for you?
Really just going out there and just being myself and going through the motions just like normal. The timing is something that we're going to work on and continue to work on. But he has that experience and he has that vet mentality to really throw to anybody, regardless of how fast or how the way they move. And just seeing him out there, he knows our speed and he knows our body types, and he knows the way we run our routes. So it's just good to go out there and to have a great practice like today. And I'm definitely excited for this game.
So again, not jabs or anything, but when talking positively about Carson Wentz, the number one thing here is The guy knows what he's doing playing quarterback. And that is something that you can't say for JJ McCarthy because he hasn't played a whole lot of quarterback before. And he alludes to that of not trying to take any shots at McCarthy in this later clip.
Of course, JJ is a new quarterback. He's young. He's still learning. He's still, developing in different ways. Just like you said, Carson has that veteran mentality. So he kind of knows the coverages, where people are going to be at, where the ball should be at. So it's a little bit different mentality. Nothing on the downside of JJ. That's just him learning the game and him being and Carson being a part of the game for so long. That just comes with time. That you can't really rush that. That's just like me. As a rookie, I wasn't the same as I am now. So just that development, that training your brain, mentally training your brain to really see the coverages and see the things that you need to see before they even happen.
Right there at the end, training your brain to see the things that you need to see before they even happen, again, sort of sounds like hey, our quarterback wasn't 100% ready for running this entire offense as a 22-year-old with 2 training camps and no actual experience outside of a couple preseason games, which has been a common question from Vikings fans is should they have played more in the preseason? I thought the answer was yes at the time. I think you probably, daily listeners would remember me saying, I'd like to see him play a whole first half of a couple of games here. That didn't happen. The explanation was reasonable enough where you'd have to play a bunch of other starters. You'd have to play the starting offensive line and you don't want to get him hurt. And O'Connell has always put more emphasis on the joint practice, but even the joint practice, it's not really the same. As much as it is a great simulation of the team playing a real defense, they can't really hit you, and it's not going full out trying to feed your family, which is what those defenses are doing. In a training camp practice, it's not quite to that level. And I think McCarthy has struggled with trying to pick apart what these defenses are doing to him when he's taking the snap and looking out there and trying to get the ball quick out. It's like, it always sounds good to have a young quarterback. Hey, have him get the ball out quick, have him do a bunch of quick game reads and so forth. And then you realize that stuff is almost always built on timing, on 3 steps, bang, that thing's supposed to be out of there. And we just haven't seen that from him. And it sounded like from the comments there from Hockenson and from Jefferson that it's a little bit relieving to have a quarterback coming in for this game that I think they really need to win. Must win in week 3 when you're 1-1 feels like a little over dramatic to me, but at the same time, it's kind of close because of just where you could see this whole thing unraveling and going if they can't find a way to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. And when they're practicing with a quarterback who knows the timing and the speed of the NFL, who knows how to read the defenses, who knows how to get rid of it. And this isn't a second guess or anything of McCarthy coming out there. It's not a accusation of, well, the coaching staff, shouldn't they know that he wasn't going to be ready for certain things? And the answer is there's no real way to tell. Because if you go out there every day for training camp and you watch and you're trying to figure it out of, well, does this look like it's supposed to look? One of the things that I thought was most impressive through training camp was McCarthy getting rid of the football. I thought he did a good job with that a lot of times, not every single rep, but I thought he did by the end of camp, a good job of that, of even just not going broke, taking a profit, underneath throws, completions. We mentioned all the completions he had in that training camp practice against the Patriots, but it's just not the same. It just isn't the same. And there's no way to really know how he's going to deal with that. And then not only that, but Justin Jefferson didn't get to practice with him. Hockenson did, but Addison's not here. Thielen didn't. Throwing routes on air in the offseason, it's just not what playing in a real NFL game is. And Carson Wentz, I think, coming in gives McCarthy an opportunity to see the same stuff that he's run by Carson Wentz and get a sense for what his timing looks like, what his reads look like, and how he's going about it. And then we'll see how the rest of all of this plays out, whether Wentz plays great, whether he's average, whether McCarthy's coming back next week or in 5 weeks or in 10 weeks. We just really can't have a good way to figure that out because we've got to see how the offense executes with somebody who has been in the league before. So I think that the picture has been painted pretty clearly after the last week of analysis of what happened and McCarthy's injury and his performance and all those different things that we've been through kind of multiple times now. But just getting that sense from the pass catchers when they're talking about, yeah, well, you know, he needs to be able to read the defenses and he needs to understand like how we run our routes and the speed we're going and then things like that. That's stuff that Carson Wentz should be able to come in and give them at least a chance. But this is the tough part about playing a young quarterback because somebody like Brock Purdy came in as a rookie and he was older and he thrived right away in Kyle Shanahan's offense. And some of you have brought up, you know, Max Brosmer and in this area specifically of the game. Now, Max Brosmer would not be running a zone read and run for a 20-yard touchdown. That's for sure. And there's a few of the throws with the velocity and the arm strength that you wouldn't see from Brosmer, but his strength is getting rid of the ball. It's reading things. It's throwing with anticipation, like all those things. And so sometimes quarterbacks are a little, even if they have a limited upside, they're a little bit better fit for this. And other quarterbacks need more time and more development to get fully comfortable. We are talking 40-something passes so far from J.J. McCarthy. But knowing what we know now, if Wentz plays pretty well, they win the game 21-17 and he's okay, then where do you take this from here? If he's just okay, but you've won and the offense looks a little bit more like an offense, do you say, all right, McCarthy, you're back in. Did you see what Carson did? Now you just go do that. Or would you rather say, we needed more practice time, we needed more development, we needed more work with him because he was always going to be a little bit more of a project type of quarterback. And they knew that. That was why they got Sam Darnold last year. They just didn't anticipate the injury. And then he looked pretty good down the stretch of training camp. They tried to bring Daniel Jones here, back. He was here, but tried to bring him back with an offer to have maybe a backup situation. I think the move to send Howell away to the Eagles and get Wentz was to give themselves an option. And I know this is injury related, but give themselves an option if they needed somebody else in this situation to step in and give them a chance to win. Carson Wentz at this moment does that. And where that takes them, I do not know. So questions, thoughts, comments, let me get to a few of them. And then Joe Goodberry, who covers the Bengals, is going to join the show. CBakes27 says, with just how underwhelming the offensive line has been, do you think that we need to start asking questions about the O-line coach, or do you attribute it most to injuries? I would definitely attribute that to injuries. I was texting with an offensive line source today, very knowledgeable source. It was Jeremiah Searles, because Jeremiah knows more. He's in that world. I mean, this is, we're all listening to the classical music, but he is the composer. Well, there's only a few people who understand truly offensive line play, and he's one of them. And so, of course, Jeremiah had seen the meme out there. It's basically become a meme at this point that Ed Ingram has a very good PFF grade for Houston. And so it's like, wait a minute, did we just give away, the next Steve Hutchinson? Naturally, I think the answer is no. And I made a milkshake bet with Jeremiah that Ed Ingram is going to finish with a PFF grade lower than 65. So we'll see what happens there. But I think that when we talk about PFF grades and offensive line performance, something that gets left behind pretty often is context. And context might just be who's in the game. Blake Brandel last year is a reasonably good guard until he doesn't have Christian Darrisaw, then he's not. And I think that this offense is also not the easiest for offensive linemen. There's a lot of straight drop back where you're sending out 4 or 5 options and you're not giving a ton of help to the offensive line. There's a lot of shifts and changes and checks and all those things that they have to do at the line of scrimmage that the quarterback is asked to handle. I think it's a mental workload for the quarterback, which also means for the line that's constantly having to make a lot of adjustments, and they pass the ball a lot, which means lots of dropbacks, lots of pass protection reps, lots of opportunities to have a negative play in there, lots of opportunities for the opponent to dial up all their stunts and twists. And somebody sent me a note earlier about asking if Kevin O'Connell's offense has been solved or something. And, I don't think that the last 4 games going back to last year and then into this year says to me, oh, they just figured them all out and it's all set. I really think that it's probably a lack of execution from the quarterback and from the offense, but I would not fully discount that other teams watched the Rams game. And when they were trying to figure out how are we going to face the Kevin O'Connell offense, you can bet more than a milkshake that they all watch the Rams game and say, all right, how did they do it? And one of the ways is just deception. And I still think that Jonathan Gannon for the Arizona Cardinals was the one that came up with the best plan against the Vikings. And it's a lot of deception. It's a lot of delay blitz. It's a lot of guys going to look like they're going to blitz, dropping back, stuff like that. And then there's a lot of stunts and different movements up front. I think I saw a stat from someone that the Vikings got stunted last year more than anybody else in the NFL. And when you have a rookie left guard, in the first week, this didn't happen to him too much, and he's fine. He grades really well. The second week, they went after him with a lot of this different movement and twists and things up front and stuff that's more deceiving and not just man versus man. And that's what the offensive line position is a lot now. And the Vikings are facing a lot of that. If you are running an offense that is under center, it does a lot, and the Vikings do a good amount of under center, but under center a lot, and a lot of play action, a lot of outside zone and rollouts and things like that, you can help your quarterback quite a bit and also help your offensive line when it comes to those PFF grades and pressures. So there's context to just about everything. Everyone I've ever heard has spoken highly of Chris Cooper as an offensive line coach. I think that he was in part responsible for turning around a unit that had gotten into a really bad place and has made them over the last couple of years reasonably good. If Darisaw plays week 1, they have almost a flawless week. So we can't forget that either, that I believe they had 6 total pressures on McCarthy and 4 of them were one guy. And when your left tackle is struggling, there's no coaching it. There's no coaching point that you can give a left tackle other than just hang on for dear life, my friend. That's it. So I think the injuries are a much bigger part of it than anything else. But I also think that there might be some merit to teams getting a feeling based on that Rams game of what was going to work. And Raheem Morris comes from Los Angeles. You think he watched the game? You think he studied that? You think he threw some of the same stuff at him? I absolutely bet that he did. And it is on this coaching staff to find some answers there, but there is no answer for backup players. There's really not. And we know that over the years where it's like, if they have Darisaw and O'Neal and Ingram and Cleveland and, whoever, there's they coach the tackles well, but they don't coach the guards, or there's no answer for someone picking up Garrett Bradbury and throwing him at the quarterback. And New England eventually will find that out too. I know he's graded pretty well over the first few weeks, but I also think some teams are throwing screens, and I think that they're running bootlegs. And I think that there are some teams, and you're going to see it from Cincinnati, who 60% of their plays or something like that, 40% of their plays are just the easiest stuff for everybody. And the Vikings haven't been in that position because they've been playing from behind, which also really hurts you. When you play from behind and the other team is doing everything that they can do. So, I think a little bit of this week has been kind of a, like the Anchorman thing. Like, are you just looking at stuff and saying that you love it? Like in this case, the opposite. Like, are we just kind of looking at stuff and being like, is that it? What about this? And yeah, so I think they're in a good spot with the coaching. But I also think that if you don't have your superstar, then you're never going to get the performance that you like. Let's see. William, when does the final injury report come out? That'll be tomorrow, but there's very likely to be several guys listed as questionable. I guess we'll see that. Shifty says, believe in KOC running quick game when I see it. Well, this did happen. It did happen when he first got here in 2022. Now, was that KOC running quick game or was that Kirk Cousins? I can get you the number on that. Because I think it might have been Kirk Cousins running more of the quick game than anything else. But let me see what the average depth of target was for Cousins in 2022, because I seem to remember him getting the ball out of his hands pretty quickly. Cousins was 11th in terms of the shortest passes in 2022. So he did have a lot and only averaged 7.1 yards per attempt. So he did have a lot of quick throws that season. I don't think it's that O'Connell is incapable. I think that with J.J. McCarthy, all of his best throws have been either deep or in the intermediate area. And when your timing isn't very good, and Kirk was really good at this, where if the read was there and he saw it, he would go bang, 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 throw. Like step, 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 throw. You know that he would have all the steps right and everything else, and guys would be where he thought, and he could throw with timing and anticipation. It's why it worked a lot, I think, for Kevin O'Connell and Kirk Cousins when it came to the quicker passes. I could take a look here at what his statistics were on those quicker passes in 2022. I think 23, he started to push the ball down the field more under Kevin O'Connell because that's what O'Connell wanted. But he still wasn't throwing a massive number of deep shots. Let's see. So it was, in terms of quick game, 0 to 9 yards, 45% of Kirk Cousins' passes in 2022 were that, and he completed 80% of them. And then in 2023, it was actually 47%, and he completed 82% of those. So it was a very high percentage when Kirk was playing quarterback. And when you had Darnold, it was a little more downfield, a little more intermediate, a little more into tighter windows because he had better arm strength. Nobody really knows what McCarthy is going to be in terms of his strengths. I think we all know that Kirk was good with timing, that he could throw a slant really well, that he could throw a little in and out or a little out-breaking route to TJ Hockenson really well. But a lot of that stuff was based on not only timing, but also chemistry. Cousins and Hockenson have been around for a long time. Hockenson, his main skill was kind of getting to space, but you have to understand where that space is. And instead, it was just a little bit against the Falcons of chicken with your head cut off, where you're not understanding anything when you're dropping back there. And that's kind of how it looked. So that is when they talk about experience. That is a lot of what they're talking about. Mama says, I'm worried if we keep losing Harrison Smith, may decide to retire mid-season before seeing the field and not deem it worth it. I wouldn't want to go there just yet. He is continuing to practice. You do start to wonder if he's not playing this week. Like, when is this going to happen? Because he wasn't placed on IR. So when is this recovery going to kind of come to fruition here? But it's concerning because he's just such the head of the snake. And when you spend your entire offseason trying to, making him the head of the snake, and then you have him 3/4 of the way through camp out and then not being able to come in now and direct the show, then you're going to ask him to kind of drop back in and start doing that. But they're not working at full capacity. In fact, last week, I would say it wasn't even close. The fact that they were in, and I've seen some of the numbers that don't really look all that good for the Vikings defense the last 2 weeks, but especially last week, you're without Harrison and you're without even Okudah plays a role on this team, and without Van Ginkel and without Cashman. It's the same sort of deal with the offensive line. Like, there's no coaching when you just have a bunch of players who usually aren't supposed to be out there, or a bunch of guys who aren't in the roles that they're supposed to be in. And you saw, I think, the value of Cashman as a run stopper when Wilson was in there. Wilson's a veteran player. He's very good in his role, but Cashman's an elite run stopping linebacker. That was part of the idea, was that he was going to take care of a lot of those things that maybe the defensive line couldn't lock in like maybe they did last year. But Cashman, when he was in there, he's chasing down running backs left and right. So these injuries, what's so frustrating about them is that we're always like solution oriented in our discussions, whether it's me or you. We're always looking for answers. Like you're asking, well, is it the offensive line coach? Like, is it, and I'm asking, is it quick game? Is it this or is it that? Right? We're always looking for the answers, but sometimes that's the frustrating part about injuries, is the answer is right there in front of us. We just, have to kind of work around that conversation, because otherwise it just ends the discussion. Like, injury. And let's sit here silently frustrated. I mean, otherwise, where do we go with that discussion? And we also have to talk about how they're going to work around these things in order to resolve them themselves, because they can't just sit silently either. Shifty BTW says, no, Wentz is a veteran, but Trey Hendrickson is going to go up against the third string left tackle, possibly. Yeah, if Darisaw doesn't play. and a young backup center. Throw might not be the ideal plan. That I agree with you for sure. They have to find a way to get ahead of the sticks and run the football with Jordan Mason. Not having Aaron Jones kind of reminds me a little bit of when the Lions didn't have David Montgomery last year. And I remember saying going into the game, like that actually might be good for them to miss Montgomery for a while, because then Gibbs just gets all the carries and he's better. And that, I think, is the case with Jordan Mason as well. And you're right about Hendrickson. And in just a minute, going to talk to Joe Goodberry about Trey Hendrickson and their defense as soon as I have to go on the radio here, which actually is right now. So let's bring you a conversation here with my friend Joe Goodberry, great analyst covering the Cincinnati Bengals. I will be back momentarily when after the interview with Manny Hill, and we'll break it all down then. So here you go, Joe Goodberry. All right, we welcome back into the show Joe Goodberry, who is Bengals on the Brain on YouTube. For my money, one of the best Bengals analysts out there, a go-to for me. As you probably remember, if you've been listening to the show all summer long, that I had Joe on the show. We did a way too early preview, and it did turn out to be way too early, because now the two starting quarterbacks that we expected for this game, Joe, are not actually playing in the game. So I will say, though, it has to be much more crushing on Cincinnati's side than a sprained ankle that can keep J.J. McCarthy out for a couple of weeks. And to tell you the truth, when the schedule came out, I looked at week 3 and said, I haven't seen Joe Burrow in person since 2021. Like, I'm excited. Burrow versus Flores. Like, let's go. US Bank Stadium. And as Mike Mularkey once said, the sail's out of the wind.
Yeah, that I was also excited for those same things. I wanted to watch Burrow and Flores go at it and just watch Burrow again, because that's fun. And instead, I've been listening to depressing songs the last few days here. A lot of Simon and Garfunkel, and I'm sitting here like, not again. Really, are we here again? And it's funny because I didn't think Vikings McCarthy too much until about Wednesday, so yesterday, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to talk to Matthew. They're in a similar situation. Their quarterback's down, and pretty much 2 years in a row. It's not season ending for you guys, but it stinks. It stinks all around to not see. It's the main course of why we watch football is the quarterback and the development on your end, or the guy that we think is an elite quarterback, and we're robbed of it. We don't get to see it.
And I wish that there was some way that we could analyze this, as in, like, we always look for actionable things from the team. What does this team need to do better? What does this guy need to do better? That's always what we're doing here. And with this, it's just like, I don't know, Joe needs to have his toe work right. Like, I don't really, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, he does take hits and he does scramble around the pocket, but it's not like he's the first quarterback to ever do that. This guy has just had some really bad luck when it comes to the injuries.
They're freak injuries, right? Like the first one, your knee gets hit. It happens. That's happened to every single quarterback. Tom Brady had it, right? We've had it twice in the last 20 years with Carson Palmer and Joe Burrow. So that stinks. And then the next one is the wrist injury that no quarterbacks had to deal with a torn ligament in the wrist and surgery. That's typically a tennis thing. I think we talked about that during the summer, and he came back and he was good last year and it was fine, but it's bad luck to have that happen. It's a rare thing. And then the turf toe, which is a terrible name for actually tearing a ligament in your big toe to the point where it's not working, right? If it's a grade 3, I listened to Ben Kurt talk about it. Because he had the same thing, but on his right foot. So that's where you're driving. It's on Burrow's left toe. It's a snap of that tendon, and it can be like an Achilles tear where that tendon pulls back completely and they have to go and surgically reattach it. And he was like, oh yeah, Burrow's not coming back at all. I had this, and it takes a long time to come back. And so we're holding out hope. The Bengals said they're not closing the door on it. I do think there is conversation, though, about getting your quarterback hit as often as the Bengals have with Burrow. And I honestly, watching the game last week, the Falcons-Vikings game, McCarthy was taking a beating back there, and they've got some offensive line issues. And typically that scheme does more to protect their quarterback with more play actions and screens and things like that to get the ball out quickly. Bengals don't do a ton of those things. They just have Burrow dropping back and throwing the ball against the porous offensive line, who a lot of linemen lately have come out and said it's a tough job to block for that offense because you're dropping back to really pass protect for 2.5 plus seconds too often, that you're going to look bad. So there is maybe some changes that the team can make around him. But Burrow is Burrow, and you got to let him cook. You got to let him do what he does best. And some of that is scrambling, running around, making plays, and being a tough dude in the pocket.
Right. He's said before that he's willing to hang in a little bit longer to take the hit if he can make the throw that he wants to make. And I think that Joe Burrow suffers from the same thing kind of Sam Darnold did, which was I'm okay with getting my body smashed if I can hang with this for just a little bit longer. And then when Sam Darnold tried to do that against the Los Angeles Rams in the playoffs, they said, we are happy to smash your face in.
We'll make that trade.
Right, exactly. And that's happened to Burrow in some games as well. But, well, we're on to Cincinnati, though, with the actual football game here. And it's probably a great place to start with Jake Browning, this supporting cast, this coaching staff. You know, when it happened in 2023, the Vikings were on the wrong side of Jake Browning and a magical comeback in the fourth quarter with one of the coolest catches I've ever seen in my life from T. Higgins.
Right.
The thing about Jake Browning is that even though he's Jake Browning and there's physical limitations there, you have probably one of the most competent backup quarterbacks in the NFL. And maybe at least he will get the ball out a little bit faster. Having some familiarity with Jake Browning, I know that he is a high IQ quarterback, very competitive, and he's not a guy that you should ever just like take for granted in a game. But what have you seen from that season and then last week from Jake Browning?
So our first exposure to Jake Browning was the Bengals drafting John Ross and seeing who is this terrible quarterback at Washington? And Ross is bailing him out and making these plays down the field. And we're like, man, that Jake Browning dude is terrible. Well, some years later, he ends up on the Bengals roster and his preseason is a disaster and he doesn't look good. And that ends up being 2023 where Burrow goes down and the Bengals actually signed Trevor Siemian because Browning didn't look good. And they're like, all right, we need a veteran quarterback to back up Joe Burrow while his calf is an issue. Siemian was terrible as well, but Browning gets inserted, and early in that 2023, they drop him into the Joe Burrow offense, which is drop back, make reads, make the correct read, get the ball out quickly to your targets, and keep functioning that way. It was a disaster. Like that first game against the Steelers, they absolutely killed the Bengals, and Browning looked horrendous. And we're all just like, yeah, this is going to be a long season. The very next week, they scrap that, and they're under center, and they're running play action. They're running wide zone runs, the stuff they have not done all year long. There's the screen percentage went up. The quick short throws went up. It was just, they understood you can't just drop Browning in there. And maybe you didn't have time to completely revamp the game plan so quickly after Burrow went down in 2023. And I get it. So it took a couple weeks. So let's see how fast it happens this time. But I think in that first game versus the Jags last week, instantly the screen percentage went up. Technically, Joe Burrow has not thrown a screen yet in 2025. Browning threw enough that he'd be considered, if he had enough attempts, to be the seventh most screen quarterback of 2025. So major difference there. They're getting the ball out of his hands and into probably Jamar Chase as often as possible. But 2023 ended up being statistically pretty strong for Browning. They go 4-3 with him. He ends up with like a 99 quarterback rating. I think it was 98.9. Efficiency numbers pretty good. 70.3 completion percentage that year to finish. Like that's really good. It saved Zach Taylor's job in a lot of ways. I think a lot of people at that time were really frustrated with the lack of creativity, they call it, all the lack of the screens, the play actions, all these things. And it was being pinned on Zach Taylor. And I think through 2023, we figured out it's not really. It's probably that Joe doesn't like it. And clearly we can see Zach can scheme up an offense if he has to. And he did under Browning. He did a great job. So I expect to see that again. I expect we're going to see more schemed throws, more schemed offense, taking it out of his hands, not making him have to put on a cape and be the hero, and instead putting it on your skill positions. And I think that makes sense, right? You have a good skill position group around Jake Browning. Let him do it. I will say in terms of difference between he and Burrow, because you're getting good production, but they're not the same player, right? There's a difference between good quarterback play and good quarterback production. They'll get good quarterback production from Jake Browning because he's willing to just throw it. The things that Burrow, sometimes he'll drop back and he'll see it like, that's not right. Let me make a play, dance in the pocket and get it to the right guy. You got to have that in today's NFL, right? But Browning will see it and he's like, I'm chucking it. And he threw 3 picks last week against the Jags. but he also threw a bunch of balls to let his receivers do their thing, and they're good players, so let them do their thing. So it's a fun brand of football. It's a scary brand of football, but there's a lot of exciting games in 2023, and chief amongst them was the Vikings game that I just rewatched and posted on X at Joe Goodberry, and then did some commentary to go back and watch. So if you haven't seen it, check that out. It's a good time.
Well, that was a game where Zach Taylor kind of figured out some things about Brian Flores' defense, and then they just kept running deep digs, so maybe like 15-yard in routes every single play. It seemed like there was some internet debate yesterday about coaches who called the same play over and over again. And this goes back to watching a lifetime of football with my dad, where he'd be like, if it's working, keep doing it. And I'm like, I agree with that. And that's what they did in that game. I think Flores will be a little more ready for it this time around. But with Browning, I went back and looked here. 25% of his throws were behind the line of scrimmage in 2023. That's like Bo Nix college numbers, where you're throwing lots of screens, lots of quick stuff. But it's a funny world in the NFL right now, because I feel like the universe of Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, and that was everybody's dream as a quarterback. I'm going to stand in the shotgun, and I'm going to make checks and changes at the line of scrimmage, and I'm going to run the whole show. But that doesn't really work for too many guys right now. I mean, Josh Allen can do whatever the heck Josh Allen wants to do, but even with Patrick Mahomes over the last couple of years, they've limited his ability to just stand back there and then run around and take deep shots. The easy button stuff, and we've talked about it a lot here with the Vikings not throwing enough screens for J.J. McCarthy and having him drop straight back and running empty protections at times that you might be asking Matthew Stafford to do. I feel like there's an effect here of almost the easy button stuff is called that for a reason, and the coach being forced to do it by the fact that he has a worse quarterback in some ways I think can help this Bengals offense, because the offensive line looks like it's pretty mushy up there.
I was just getting to this point watching the rest of the league where I was like, I blame the Bengals and Burrow for watching some of these other offenses just drop back straight out of the shotgun and just trying to have their quarterback pick apart defenses, because the Bengals have had such success at it, right? And from early Burrow, just implanting the LSU offense in 2021, right? And then carrying that and scrapping a lot of their under center wide zone stuff, because it just looked too disjointed to have two different offenses running, right? So they scrapped the one and just went full spread. And it worked. And the Bengals have had a good offense. That's the part. Like, they've started off slow this year. They've started off slow every year. Towards the midpoint and towards the end of the season, that drop back offense is phenomenal. And it's high efficiency, high EPA. They look good. And so it's hard to criticize it too much. The criticism is that you're making Burrow do so much and drop back so often, take so many hits. He looks drained at times after games, dropping back 40 times, and maybe 5 of them are easy button plays, and there's 35 others where he is deciphering pre-snap, post-snap, and it looks like a lot on a lot of guys. And then if you make a postseason run, I mean, you're just adding to that toll. So I'm watching around the league, and you're right, there's other teams that are doing it, and I'm like, even the Chiefs, who had such a great scheme for so many years, and I think they lost some weapons, so they can't get as deep. They can't do some of the things they want to do. Kelsey's not the same guy. Their running game is a shell of what it used to be at times. So now they've got Mahomes dropping back a ton of true pass sets lately. Their line is getting killed in some ways. I think they're better, on the interior than the Bengals are. Josh Simmons looks like a good player. But it's interesting to watch the evolution around the league. And I was just getting to this point before Burrow got hurt where I was thinking, I'm blaming the Bengals for this. The teams are looking at what they're doing, and I don't think it's right. I think you need these easy button throws, these Shanahan style. I think McConnell is one of the guys I look at and say that normally they can do that. Maybe they weren't running the screens right now, but I do think the Vikings are one of those offenses that I would like to emulate a little bit more of.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that is I feel like over the last couple of years, what I've seen is so many teams running more stunts and interior blitzes than probably ever before. And that's where when you're dropping straight back, and even the other night, so the Vikings have a strip sack, and on the play, Atlanta, they send a guy fake blitzing, which messes up Brian O'Neill's
coffee
read.
house.
That it was sort of like that. Yeah, the it was a little bit like that. It was kind of like take one step and then drop back, as opposed to that sort of the coffee houses where you kind of delay.
Oh, that was the Texans Bucks game where Lamont David, I think, dropped back and then came down. So I was confusing the two Monday night games.
Yeah, but you're even seeing this in college now. They're starting to do some of these things. And so the guy just kind of fakes coming on a blitz and then drops back into coverage, and that messes up the tackle. And then like the number of straight dropbacks where there is something that goes wrong on the offensive line because of the amount of confusion, the amount of interior rushers who are absolute freaks these days, the amount of linebackers who have great speed, who are getting to the quarterback really quick. I just think it's really, really hard to live in that world where you're dropping straight back, and it might actually help them to be forced not to. But the Vikings have had a bit of an Achilles heel here in the first 2 weeks, which is stopping the run, especially against Bijan Robinson. And I know that Chase Brown is not Bijan Robinson, and the human being with the rock in his hands makes a difference. But can the Cincinnati Bengals run the ball against this Vikings defense?
Great question. You could have ended it just before you said Vikings defense. Can the Bengals run the ball? Great question. We're all asking the same thing. Not only are they not consistently trying to run the ball with Burrow, so we'll have to see if that changes, right? I expect it to under Browning. Can they get a push up front? They look so disjointed. Somehow this running game got worse through 2 games, and I don't know how that's possible. I mean, they fired the offensive line coach, who was also the run game coordinator in the offseason. They didn't replace run game coordinator on their staff, so I think it's just more of an effort from the whole unit, the whole coaching staff. But it's disjointed. It's broken. It's the guys up front, the O-line are not running in sync. They're not working together very well. They're not passing guys off very well. They're not getting to the second level. They're not getting a lot of push. Everything that you can say about a run game, especially up front, is bad. And I like Chase Brown. I like him a ton. I hope they figure out and really put an emphasis on figuring out this run game. Maybe Burrow does come back, and in the meantime, you've kept your head above water and you've got a run game. That would be best case scenario. I would love to see that. I don't know. I really don't know if the Bengals know what they're doing up front at all. There's really nothing that gives me any hope right now that they can scheme up a run game. So if you're looking for a glimmer of hope there, it's that the Bengals are probably looking at 2nd and 8+, and then probably 3rd and 8+ if they don't complete a pass on that second down. Maybe it's a screen on second down since they run so many of those. But point is, it's bad.
Well, and that really does play to the Vikings' favor because you have 2 great interior rushers and edge players who can get to the quarterback. But the run stopping sacrifice that they made by moving Harrison Phillips, not bringing back Jonathan Bullard, is that is going to be a weakness. But if the Bengals can't run anyway, we also know that if Dalton Reisner is on your offensive line, you're not going to have a lot of success running. He is a good pass protector. He's a veteran player. And when Cincinnati signed him, I went like, yeah, they kind of have to at this point. But there's a reason why the guy's always unsigned into September every year, is because he truly is about the worst run blocking guard in the NFL. And I think that's going to be an X factor for this game, but it's all going to come down to, can the Vikings cover Higgins and Chase? How much can they still do with those 2 guys?
They can still do a ton with them, actually. And I think we saw it last week where it was funny when Chase caught his 10th pass of the game. I said, oh, really? I can't believe it's been that many. It kind of snuck up on me. And then next thing I know, it's 14 catches, right? And he's FedEx air ground, however they do it, player of the week. And he had a huge game, and T. Higgins had a touchdown and Chase had a touchdown. And I think that will still feed them pretty well. I think last time Jamar's average depth of target dropped under Browning, which I expect he's the guy you're going to throw the screens to when you can. I think it'll be him and Chase Brown. We'll see if they rarely throw a screen to T. Higgins or Andre Yosibasha. We'll see how it goes from there. But I think the deep balls are the jump balls, the deep digs are still going to T. They'll move Jamar around so much. And that's the thing they do now, I think more than 2023, is they move Jamar to every single spot. He's used like a true number 1. So I think he's still going to get 10+ targets. You should still expect 10 targets a game for him. And he typically wins those. So as long as he's having a good moment, good game, he's going to get his numbers. It just may be a little bit less yards per catch. Or T, maybe the volume's a little bit less, but he's still going to make those big plays down the field. I still think they're going to, when in doubt, I still think this offense throws the ball. It doesn't matter if it's Browning or Burrow. And because they can't run the ball, I think they end up in those situations a ton. So if I'm in fantasy and I've got this question a lot this week, what do I do with T? What do I do with Jamar? Is it a big hit? I'm like, no, I'm still would think you may bring down the cap on both guys a little bit, right? Maybe Jamar is not going to end up triple crown 1,700, 17 touchdowns, but maybe it's still 90 catches and 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. Like that's still worthy of your roster spot and starting every week.
Yeah, and I think that if we make the comparison of Jefferson and Chase, the biggest difference is that you can take Jamar Chase and just be like, here, football, run. And that's not really who Justin Jefferson is. Justin Jefferson is a little more reliant on his quarterback getting rid of the football in his direction 20 yards down the field, which is why I think it worked so well with Sam Darnold, because he would just force that ball in there to Jefferson. We've never really seen them establish that just quick passing game to Jefferson. It's almost always been intermediate and downfield, where Chase is really quarterback proof in that way. I'm not saying that you and I could do it, but if Jake Browning can just get him the football like that, he can make plays with his legs. I think he's like, remember how many great running backs there were when we were growing up? And now a lot of them are just playing wide receiver and learning to catch as kids. And that's Jamar Chase. Let me give you brought up fantasy, the show brought to you by FanDuel. So let me give you a couple of numbers here on the Bengals offense, and then we could talk about the defense. Jake Browning over under 239 and a half yards. Where would you sit on that?
I would say over. I think they're going to throw the ball. I think this is going to be a tight game that demands you to stay with the passing game. And again, because the running game has looked so bad, I would take the over.
So does that mean you're taking the under on Chase Brown 69 and a half yards?
I would. Yeah. I'd say this is probably a 50-something yard game again on 15 carries, just absolute terrible yards per attempt. And we'll take it.
I think the number on Jamar Chase is probably pushed down by Jake Browning, maybe errantly here. 69 and a half yards receiving for Jamar Chase feels like, empty my bank account on that. But I think we're both going over on that one, right?
I would go over on that for sure. And it's funny. I feel like the Vikings aren't blitzing as much this year, but because they show it so much still, that I think there's going to be a lot of quick funneling passes to Jamar just to get the ball out of his hands. And maybe the Vikings tackle really well and rally and get to him and stop him, and it puts a cap on his yards. But I just think he's a big play waiting to happen. That's one big play, and you're hitting the over on that.
All right. On the defensive side, Trey Hendrickson, it's amazing how some of these players don't really need training camp. Seems like he's just fine to me. This is the biggest question that we have going into this game is, will it be Christian Darrisaw? Will it be Walter Rouse? You're talking about a fifth-year sophomore player versus one of the superstars of the National Football League facing off with Trey Hendrickson. But I notice Shamar Stewart is on the injured list here, so I don't know what his situation's going to be.
He's out. Yeah.
You think he's definitely going to be out? Okay. Yeah. So it does look like to me, though, that the Bengals defense, which we expected to be hot garbage, has been okay through the first couple of weeks. How would you describe it?
Yeah, I would say okay. Same way you said it, because there are moments where we are frustrated, wondering what is going on. And I watch the film and it's like, oh, they're just sitting in cover 3 or single high safety. And especially on critical downs, they're not blitzing. They're blitzing amongst the least in the league. But it's interesting because they'll send 4, but they'll drop a D end and send a linebacker or a nickel corner or a safety or whatever. So it's still 4. And I don't think a lot of these charting services chart that as a blitz. Although I would say that is because you're trying to overload one side of the offense. So you still have to be aware of what they're doing. But it's a lot of man coverage on money downs. And if you got good receivers, they're going to get open on that. Right. The Bengals corners aren't great. Although I think Dax Hill has started the year really well. He's probably there. It's Trey as their star, but man, Dax is going to flash a ton if you're watching this game. And if you haven't watched the Bengals, he's in the slot. He play the boundary. They'll move him around. They'll cover tight ends with him. So he's been a good time to see what he's doing. The defense, though, has made big plays in big moments. So they're getting the turnovers. They're getting the interceptions. They're catching all these tip balls. They're raking at the ball, trying to pull it out. Those big plays have saved them and kept them in games and probably won the game 2 weeks in a row for them. But they have been the beneficiaries of a lot of drop passes from the Browns and the Jags in crucial moments. So it's hard to completely say they're good. They're playing well because if those guys hold on to those balls, it's a completely different game. The Bengals are probably 0-2 if they're not dealing with that.
Yeah, I saw the Brian Thomas Jr. a couple of those
That
drops.
was weird. He had a weird game.
Very, very gnarly. And also, just as an aside, I don't know exactly what they're doing with Travis Hunter, but do something different.
Do
Because
anything.
that doesn't right. That doesn't seem to be working for a guy with that kind of talent. But I keep coming back to Hendrickson as the factor for this game. 14 pressures in his first 2 weeks. My goodness. I mean, look, this is a Cincinnati problem of why you don't give that guy whatever money he needs for as long as he needs. The last time he even faced off with Darisaw, he had 2 sacks. This dude, I think, is probably the least talked about absolute freak pass rusher in the NFL. I think if you went to 100 people and said, hey, who led the NFL in sacks last year? They'd be like, I don't know, Myles Garrett,
Right.
TJ Watt, like 17 and a half sacks and then 14 pressures and 2 sacks through the first 2 weeks. This dude is a problem. And even with if Darisaw comes back, you're talking about facing the best of the best right off the bat.
Yeah, and that's the last 2 years. I think he leads the league in total sacks. 4 straight Pro Bowls. He was second in Defensive Player of the Year last year, and he looks as good, if not better, so far through 2 weeks. And listen, each team has been hampered at left tackle. Walker Little didn't look the same as that what I remember. He was really struggling in week 1. DeJuan Jones does not look like a good player right now. I don't know what's going on with the Browns there. He looked like he had a strong rookie year, but I guess Callahan left, so maybe that was the biggest difference for them. But he was killing him, absolutely killing him. And Flacco's getting that ball out really quickly. But the Bengals are doing things different with Trey for the first time. He was 99% of his snaps at right defensive end throughout his time with the Bengals and Lou Anarumo. He's actually playing a little bit of left defensive end now. If it looks like they're going weak, strong side. So at times they'll be like, okay, kick Trey to the weak side and let him rush, get away from that tight end. But also they're doing a lot of stunts and twists up front. So he's getting chances to slide inside or stunt inside, loop inside and go against the defensive tackle once in a while. Still, it's been money downs, third downs, late in the game. Trey's getting wider and he's just teeing off. And if you allow him to do that, he is extremely dangerous.
So what do you think of Carson Wentz? You know Carson Wentz. He's been around. What do you think of Carson Wentz? You afraid of Carson Wentz?
I mean, there was a time where Wentz was good and fun and athletic with a strong arm. He's never really had a big game against the Bengals. Even going back to his Eagle days, I remember he threw 3 picks in a game. Vontaze Burfict got him over the middle on a fake blitz and then jumped right into his face and intercepted a pass. I always felt like you could get him second reaction or off script and confuse him a bit, and he would force things. While he had the athleticism and arm to do it, he just kind of fell apart in those situations. I think he could be a low-end starter in the league. He never really has had that opportunity since. I guess opportunity is weird. If he wins a job, he would go and win it if he was good enough. I still think his pocket presence is an issue and has been it throughout his career. And then if you can get him to try and create and go off script, maybe confuse him a bit with some rotations after the snap, you can get him to throw a ball that's maybe ill-advised. And if you can, that could be the difference in this game because Browning is going to give you a couple. So which team actually intercepts the balls that go into their defender's vicinity? And I think that's the team that probably wins.
Yeah, and this is where I think it comes down to and why Hendrickson is so important and why the front for the Bengals is so important, because if pressure is created on Carson Wentz, this is a guy who hasn't really started since 2022, and it didn't go very well in 2022, so he hasn't really started and had any sort of success since late in the season 2021. That is 2, 3, 4. That's a long time ago now. You were just finding out about Joe Burrow in 2021,
right.
the last time that Carson Wentz was playing well. And yet, when I look here, we were doing the over-unders on FanDuel, 200.5 yards. I think Carson Wentz is going to throw for more than 200 yards in this game because I just don't see the Vikings at any point. And we need to stop talking about it all offseason and accepting that they're not just going to slam a team's face in with the run game. If they were going to do it, they would have done it the last couple of weeks, and they were still having JJ McCarthy, drop straight back and things like that. I think that Kevin O'Connell, it's in his nature to be like, oh, new quarterback, throw the ball. Here we go down the field. And I think that's what this will come down to is, can they protect him well enough? Because we've seen him throw in warm up and practice and everything. I mean, the arm is still very live, but it's just, can they give him time to make plays against this Cincinnati secondary. Because you mentioned, if you're playing, I don't think they'll play cover one against this team because nobody does. But if they do, they're going to get smoked by Justin Jefferson. So I think the opportunities will be there.
Yeah, it's interesting that the Bengals did play it against it makes sense against the Browns because it's really Jerry Jeudy and he's kind of, he's never really fulfilled that wide receiver one potential. But then against the Jags, they played it a bunch, even though the Jags can beat you with their receivers and they've got 3 guys. And De'Ami Brown was the one actually doing the work, and he looks pretty good. I was a big fan of his coming out of North Carolina. But yes, the front is going to be the big test here. And the Bengals don't get a lot of pressure other than Trey Hendrickson. Like if you look at their totals, you're like, man, they're getting decent pressure. But yeah, that's Trey getting most of that again. Even one of their nickel defensive tackle is Chris Jenkins, Jr., second-year guy out of Michigan. He has a 0 pass rush win rate so far. He has not won a single pass rush based on PFF, which is insane. He's got like 46 rushes so far. Yeah, should probably have won one of those.
At least one, just by accident.
One, please. He should have fallen.
The other guy slips or something. Yeah.
Something. And Shamar Stewart was getting a lot of those reps as either the rush power left defenseman really try and push the pocket towards Trey, or they're kicking him in the defensive tackle. And he's been fun because at least he's got raw power. His hands are a wreck. He's like an inflatable arm man out there. But at the same time, he's powerful and will run through your face if he has to. And then, so now he's gone. He's got an ankle. I think it's a low ankle sprain, high ankle sprain. 2 to 3, maybe 4 weeks. So he's definitely out of this game. So Miles Murphy's going to probably kick in and take those reps, who's been okay. But again, not racking up any stats. Same with Joseph Osai, been okay, not racking up any stats. It's just Trey. It's only Trey. And there's a lot of frustration from early to midpoints of different weeks for week 1 and week 2, where it's like they're getting no pressure in 2 straight drives and we're starting to freak out. And then Trey has a sack. And you're like, okay, there we go. Here, back on it, I guess, on 3rd down. We finally got one, but that's been the Bengals defense.
All right, Joe, before you tell me who you think is going to win this football game, I want you to give me a totally random X factor here. Something that I'll give you one first and let you think. Okay. I think the Vikings return game is an X factor for them. In the first week, it worked really, really well with Miles Price, an undrafted free agent who came in and was like, whoa, this kid can really return some punts. Second week, not so much. And it made a big difference with, and now we're seeing all these kick returns. The Vikings have almost as many kick returns this year as they did all of last year. Last year, they had 14. This year, they've already got 11. So the execution of the kick and punt return game, I think, will matter in a day where there could be mistakes, there could be turnovers, there could be strip sacks. This could be a circus. You never know when that one special teams play is going to come through. So that would be my X factor.
Good shout out on the special teams there because Evan McPherson looks a lot better this year. He's back to looking normal. That could be a big, advantage or at least a fight between these two teams if it's a close game. Which kicking game gets off better? Ryan Rico, the same. The Bengals probably won a game against the Browns at the end there because he downed it at the 1 on the last possession for the Browns. Like gave him almost no chance to get down the field and kick a field goal. So he's been good. Interesting on the kick returns as well. Charlie Jones is supposed to be their primary kick returner, but the Bengals put 2 guys split out there on each end because the teams are kicking it into the corners. And the Jags kicked it to Samaje Perine, who's supposed to be the blocker for Charlie Jones every time. And Perine looked good. He just ran full speed straight and bounced off dudes. And he had like a 25 and some change average. He was getting them out to 35, 40 each time. And it's like, hey, we'll take this field position all day long if you want to keep kicking it to Perine. So he did a really good job there. I'm interested to see how that evolves. If you want to do that, or maybe give it to Charlie Jones and see if you can, he's a skinny dude. Maybe you can hit him and knock that ball loose. I'll give you one though. The Bengals wide receiver 3 has been interesting for me. Andre Yoshivash has been taking pretty much all of those snaps, but they've been slowly rotating in Mitchell Tinsley. And if you watch the preseason game against the Commanders, he had like 3 crazy catches on one drive and really solidified his spot on the roster. He was a former Commander too, so maybe a little revenge preseason action for him. The Bengals didn't even play him the last preseason game. They said, you made the roster, you're good. And this was right off the heels of a Jermaine Burton injury. The Bengals have just made Burton inactive since then because Tinsley has been so good. Well, he got his first NFL target last week. They've been bringing him in on like heavy or obvious run situations, maybe as the blocker, putting him in motion a lot, and just trying to use him like, hey, this is our blocking guy. And I think the Jags must have slept on it because they give him one-on-one on a fade ball. Browning threw it up, who throws a really catchable fade ball, and then that's a good thing for Higgins, but maybe it's also a really good thing for Tinsley. Goes up one-handed, keeps both feet in, gets a shin in, makes a great, amazing first target catch of his career. And I wonder if we're going to start to see more of that. Because if that's a guy that can go up and get a ball for you and you're starting Browning, I really like that option. Yoshi has really done nothing as wide receiver 3. I'd like to see more of a rotation. And maybe that includes Charlie Jones and maybe Jermaine Burton at some point.
This sounds like the exact type of player who would have a random huge breakout game against the Minnesota Vikings, and we'd be saying it's the Mitchell Tinsley game, and you'll never forget it. So, we'll see. I mean, this one becomes every NFL game is unpredictable. This one becomes supremely unpredictable when we have 2 backup quarterbacks in the mix. So everybody just strap in, hold on for the ride, and we'll have to see what happens. Joe Goodberry, Bengals on the brain. So good to get together with you again, though. Even though it's under these circumstances without the quarterbacks we expected, it's always good football talk, man. So best of luck to you going forward for another rocky season. And, I'm sure we'll talk again soon down the road. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Bengals on the brain, a great Cincinnati Bengals analyst. And we're going to bring in here Manny Hill in just a moment. But let me get you the fact that we have some sponsors first, and then we'll load up Manny here. Doing this on the fly. Usually we do this off the air, getting him into the room. There we go. Manny, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, got you loud and clear.
Okay, well, how about that? Nice and smooth and easy. And if you guys can hear everything okay, let me know. Because usually we figure this out beforehand, but doing it live at the moment. So let me, my volume went down. Okay. Yeah, this is, for some reason, Manny, explain to me why in the world, there it goes. I got it back up. Why in the world do they make microphones that automatically adjust the volume as opposed to just giving you a volume button and letting you do it yourself? Like I'm watching it right now and it keeps like adjusting on its own and is annoying me like crazy. So I'm going to have to go in here and turn up the gain a little bit. See, can you hear that? It keeps doing it to me. Now we're, I think, okay. How does that sound now? Is that okay? I think that's okay.
Good to me.
I think that's okay. It's so annoying. Okay, now I think I went too high. Okay, everybody, I'll figure this out in just a second. I think I went too hot on that now. Got a little over exuberant.
They probably designed it for a big booming voice like mine that they think somebody like me is talking into it. That it's, this microphone's got to adjust.
Yeah, no, right. It's just like extra technological stuff for the sense of extra technological stuff, where they're like, oh, you know what would be really cool is if the microphone adjusts the audio itself. And then it makes it go way down when I don't need it. So, okay, let me know if that's okay. My levels now are good and very similar to Manny's. So that allows me to let you guys know about my friends over at Hims. If you've been hit with the old hair loss bug, you don't have to be frustrated. You don't have to be in denial because there is help and it's not all that hard. Now, I know I did this with Manny. Manny in the room. Manny looks like that on purpose because you look better that way. I'm sorry, Manny. That was rude. Anyway, let me try that again. So if you're losing the hair and you don't want to look great like a bald guy like Manny, then I promise you can get your hair back through Hims. And the next step, it's not that hard. Access easy treatments with Hims with clinically proven ingredients like finasteride and minoxidil that will stop hair loss and regrow hair within 3 to 6 months. No waiting rooms, no hoops, just ingredients and a track record of results. Hims offers convenient access to a range of prescription hair loss treatments with ingredients that work, and you can do it your way, whether that's chews, oral medication, or with sprays. You shouldn't have to go out of your way to feel like yourself. So it's 100% online access to personalized treatments to put your goals first. No hidden fees, surprise costs, just real personalized care on your schedule. Go over to hims.com/Purple Insider for simple online access to personalized and affordable care for hair loss, ED, weight loss, whatever you're looking for. That's hims.com/Purple Insider for your free online visit. See website and important safety information. I swear I didn't do that on purpose, Manny. I swear I didn't. But let's just move on from all that and microphone talk and so forth and get into some football discussion. So How you feeling, Manny? It's been, it's been a couple days, and I think there's been a chance to settle down a little bit for everybody. I've noticed that the chat has taken a big kind of, deep breath and stopped the freak out a little bit about this week and what's going forward with JJ McCarthy. But how are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good overall. Obviously, with the Vikings being as banged up as they are, really on both sides of the ball, it raises a lot of question marks, and I think it kind of changes the way we feel about where this season could potentially go. It's all going to depend on how healthy they can get over these next couple of games, but at least I think this is an opportunity, these next 3 games, certainly, for them to kind of stay afloat if they can, why as their roster's getting more and more healthy over the next couple of weeks, hopefully, fingers crossed. These next 3 games are an opportunity for them to still win some games, because I think they're going to be very, very winnable against some possibly lesser opponents.
Right, I agree. And I think that you kind of at this point have to, if you are Vikings fans following this season, you have to just grab onto the side, because you might get thrown over with how rocky this could get. And for these folks, the unfortunate part of this season is that they've been through this so many times before. They have seen the season where the random quarterback pops up. I mean, think about how close we were after week 1 of 2017 to being like, Sam Bradford is the franchise quarterback. Think about how last year, how close we were to saying Sam Darnold was the franchise quarterback. I mean, after week 17, I'm sure you and I did the show and said, this is your QB. You have to find a way to keep him. And then, of course, Vikings happens and you just, nope. And that football being, pulled out from Charlie Brown has happened so many times. And I think that there's a lot of that feeling right now. And all I can really say is that there are different paths that this could take, and some of them are still good. It's like, it doesn't have to mean that this is just over for JJ McCarthy. It doesn't have to mean it's over for this season. I think you have to alter expectations from this team should compete for the Super Bowl with their young quarterback and they should be at the top of the NFC North to that's still there. But also the other side of this is now possible as well. And we'll continue to answer you guys' questions if you want to throw them in the chat. But K-Fow says, would it hurt McCarthy to sit the season behind Wentz? And that's the hardest thing to figure out, Manny, is what is the right thing? I was talking earlier about being solutions oriented on the show. We're always trying to find the right answers for the Minnesota Vikings to win football games. That's how we shape the discussion. We don't just come on and yell and complain. We look for what's the way that they should be doing it? What's the answer here? And I don't know, because when you start talking about having him sit for another year, you start to get into Trey Lance territory. Like, this guy's not playing, and Anthony Richardson territory. And at the same time, it's like, well, can he learn how to run quick game with perfect timing if he's over there on the sideline? But then if they win the next 2 games with Carson Wentz, can you say to Carson Wentz, hey, buddy, thanks, good job. Now we're going to go back to the guy who couldn't figure it all out when he played in his first 2 games? That's where, with this situation, I'm not sure what the right thing is to do. I truly do not know what the right thing is to do. I think that the information has to present itself to us.
No question. And I think what makes this especially challenging is the reason why that, what seems to be holding JJ McCarthy back, or what seems to be, I don't know, stunting his development, has been his health, injuries. I mean, he had the knee injury last year that kept him out the entire year. And then you get this ankle sprain that's going to keep him out at least a few weeks. That's where you do kind of wonder, like you said, you wonder if it's going to be an Anthony Richardson or Trey Lance type of situation, because that has literally been what has held those 2 guys back and really stunted their development, is that they just couldn't stay healthy and get enough reps and get enough playing time. That's, it's one thing if he just wasn't playing well, JJ McCarthy, he just wasn't playing well, and KOC decided, okay, let's sit him. We'll continue to have him learn behind the scenes. Let's get Carson Wentz in there and let's see if JJ can, remain healthy, still be very healthy, and still, participate in certain things during the week. But now it's like, okay, he's got this injury and he needs to learn, still needs to continue to develop, but he's also got to make sure that his body is going to continue to hold up and function. And, an ankle sprain is an ankle sprain. It's different from, a meniscus tear and having to get surgery like he had last year, but still, it's still an injury. It's still sort of that ramp up time that he's going to need to get when he is ultimately healthy and is ready to come back. So it's a very, very tricky situation.
There's no obvious answer here, because if you say that the guy just needs more experience because he's a young quarterback, but then you also say the best thing is to sit him for the team, how do those things coexist? And they really can't. So you almost have to have this decision tree where you start off by asking yourself, and this is probably a meeting inside TCO Performance Center this week between front office, coaches. I'm sure they had this sit down and this discussion of, if Carson Wentz does X, we stay with Wentz. If he does Y, then we go back to McCarthy. If we feel like, and when in their analysis of ripping apart the tape, if we feel like X percentage was just the quarterback, but X percentage wasn't, and if that percentage isn't that high, that was JJ McCarthy's fault when they looked at the tape, then they might feel much more comfortable going back to him and say, well, we've got to clean up this. That we need Jordan Addison back, we need Darisaw back, but we think he'll be fine. Like, those are things that they know that we can only guess at. I think when the ball comes out that slow, you've got some problems with experience and someone who needs to play, because that is the Trey Lance problem of, I think Trey Lance could throw a football. I think he couldn't see defenses and see at the speed that he needed to see. And so you might end up sticking with Wentz and then having, and this is like, he could be playing next week, McCarthy, or he could be playing week 1 next year or never again. Like, this is all this stuff can happen depending on where it goes. If I had to pick the most likely, I think that he's probably back playing, I would say maybe in London against the Cleveland Browns. I think if they split these next 2 games and Wentz is just sort of meh, then you just go back to McCarthy and you ride wherever it goes. That's in the decision tree. I think that's the one that's the most likely.
Yeah. And well, it kind of makes me wonder too. I mean, you remember this back in 2017 when Sam Bradford has the great game week 1 against the Saints. And then we find out that his knee he's got a problem with his knee. Case Keenum starts the next week in Pittsburgh. It's a disaster. But then, the Vikings win a couple games. Case has that great game against the Buccaneers at home at US Bank Stadium. And then remember, they brought Bradford back to start the game at Soldier Field, and Sam looked lost. And it got so bad, and it was kind of, I don't know if the knee was still bothering him, but for some reason that internal clock of get rid of the football was just not there, and the offense really struggled. They went to Case, and then Case brought them back and led them to a victory, and the rest is history with that season. That kind of makes me wonder, okay, let's say Carson Wentz does play well over the next couple of games, and you still decide to go with McCarthy, and he comes out and he struggles. Then what do you do? And it's a kind of a different situation with JJ, because he's a guy that you're still viewing as your franchise quarterback, a young guy that still needs to develop. And the only way he's going to develop is by playing. So if he comes back after Wentz does so well and he plays poorly, what do you do? Because you can't leave him out there, because you're still trying to win games. But also the other side of it is, if you pull him, what is that going to do to his confidence, his development? What does that say about where he's going to go big picture? So it's a really, really, and all of this has to be, we have to see how things go over the next couple of games with Carson Wentz anyway. But these different scenarios that could possibly happen, it kind of reminds me of the video game that you play, where you make a decision and it can kind of take you in different directions, and the game can kind of end in different ways depending on the options that you choose.
Choose your own adventure games, except for in this case, you don't get to choose. Life gets to choose for you. And I think that 2017 and 2008 are the seasons that are there to show you how tough this can be in Vikings history, where, Gus comes back never expecting to get to play, and then things go wrong for Tavares Jackson. Gus has got to get in there. He's winning games, but he's not looking good, which is a hard scenario because if Wentz were to win games but look bad, that's kind of what happened with Case as well, because there was a real conversation within the Vikings that year in 2017 of whether to play Teddy when he came back. There were players on the team who wanted Teddy to come in and play. Now, of course, that would have been a lot to ask of Teddy to come back from that catastrophic knee injury, but that was a real meeting that they had. And I think it was Everson Griffin told us in the locker room that they got the leaders together with Zimmer and they decided to stick with Case because, Teddy hadn't played and all those things. But if you think that or we know or anybody knows where it's going, I mean, the people who do this for their job, who know everything about football and everything about player evaluation, they don't have the right answers either. I think we can all say, hey, Tavares Jackson should not have started that playoff game against the Eagles in 08. But, who knows? Like Gus Frerotte might have done the same exact thing. I'm sure Gus still feels like he should have been playing. But think about how the San Francisco 49ers, just to demonstrate how unpredictable quarterbacks are, in 2023, Kyle Shanahan called Brock Purdy and told him, hey, we're going to try to get Tom Brady to come out of retirement to play for us. And would you be okay with sitting a year? You're still our guy for 2024. And Brock Purdy was like, I guess. I mean, if you're bringing in the GOAT. And then Brady says, no, I have to own a team and be on TV and play flag football in Saudi Arabia or something. Sorry, I'm a little busy with retirement. And then Brock Purdy goes to the Super Bowl and is in overtime against Patrick Mahomes. It's like life is crazy, guys, when it comes to the quarterback position. I got a question from George, said, how did the Packers dominate the Commanders down 2 starting offensive linemen? Somehow their O-line coach coached up the backups. Does depend on who is out. Christian Darrisaw is not your run-of-the-mill offensive lineman. He's not somebody you can replace. There are 5 guys who are Christian Darrisaw in the NFL, franchise left tackles, maybe 5 to 7 out of 32 teams. The rest are just holding on for dear life at left tackle. So there's that. I also want to throw this stat at you too. You also have a veteran quarterback now. Jordan Love, when running play action, is 14 for 20 with 202 yards and 2 touchdowns. What is that good for a quarterback rating of 135.8 when Jordan Love is running play action? Because they've been ahead of the sticks and they've played great defense and they've had their offense moving. They've run the football well. And I'll take a look at where he ranks in terms of, time to throw. I'm sure that Jordan Love has not been hanging on to the football too long because a little bit, but he's more of a playmaker. His average time to an attempt is, let's see here. Oh, actually, he's been holding on to the ball a little bit longer. That's probably the play action stuff. So, the point is that that's experience. Did Jordan Love do that? Would he have been okay in his first 3 starts with no offensive lineman out there? Like, probably not. Probably not. I'm guessing, in fact, I saw it in 2023, just how bad Jordan Love looked when he got some pressure in that season. And then by the end of the year, he was really good. And that right there, that season tells you how much these things can change, because midway through 2023, we all walked out of Lambeau and said, Jordan Love ain't got it, folks. Move on. No Brett Favre here. And then still going into this season, there were conversations about whether Jordan Love had it or not.
Well, and that's after Jordan Love had actually sat behind Aaron Rodgers for multiple seasons. It wasn't like, year 2 or starting as a literal rookie for him. Like, he had been sitting behind one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and he still, in his first couple of starts, had some struggles. I mean, and this is kind of what the Vikings are learning now with JJ McCarthy is there's just gonna be bumps in the road along this process, and we see it with almost every young quarterback not named Matt Ryan, who goes 11-5 as a rookie and takes the Falcons to the playoffs, or Joe Flacco, who takes the Ravens to the AFC Championship game as a rookie. Jaden Daniels last year, but even Jaden Daniels, like last year, the first couple of games, it was kind of like, okay, really like this kid, but there's some growing pains there. And then obviously he got better and better as the season went along, and the rest is history there. But these are the trials and tribulations of having a young quarterback. You're just going to have these moments where it's going to be really frustrating. And the Vikings are in a tough spot because, in addition to all the injuries they have right now, they have a very veteran roster, and all of these free agents that they went and got, and the trade for Jordan Mason. These guys are ready to win right now. So it's a very tricky situation.
Let me throw you this one. It was an example that my previous guest brought up about Joe Burrow. Week 1, 2021 was Joe Burrow's second season, so he already played, but he had the injury and he missed a lot of time. So in his week 1, he was marvelous against the Vikings and threw for 2 touchdowns, 261 yards, completed 70.
That.
Yeah, he was, you all remember, he was great.
Great.
The very next week, he threw 3 interceptions against the Chicago Bears and was 19 for 30 with less than 7 yards per attempt, no big time throws, 2 turnover worthy plays, 5 times sacked, and a 66 quarterback rating. That just, I mean, right there, that's a guy who was in his second year and you have inconsistency. We used to call it the Kirk coaster because Kirk, after all the years he had been in the league, he would still drive you crazy with 1 week that was really great or 1 month that was really great and the next month that was down. So, and I see Enemy Cap says still freaking out about it. I think that it's not unreasonable to freak out about it because of how much Vikings fans have wanted it and how much they need it. And I've talked a lot about just the fan reaction to this because that's been interesting in itself, but also this front office, this head coach, they need this. Not that they're on the hot seat if JJ McCarthy goes bust. It's very much like a San Francisco or a Los Angeles where you've earned a lot of your stripes. Now, those teams I know have gone to the Super Bowl, but you've shown that you can coach. So if this doesn't work out, it's probably more the quarterback than it is the coach and so forth. But, things get hot quick in the NFL. And even someone like Kyle Shanahan going into this year is like, if this doesn't work out, like how long is Kyle Shanahan going to be there? And so I'm not saying anyone's on the hot seat, but their whole plan was around this one person. And then when that's the case, it would sort of be like if your whole life plan was to marry your girlfriend and you move in together after the marriage and you find out that she does some crazy stuff that you didn't know about. And then after 2 weeks, you're like, is this bad? And look, you have to work through that, right? Because this is a marriage with JJ McCarthy. But at the same time, if they get to the end of the season and they don't know, or it goes bad, then this whole idea, this whole plan that we talked about for years just implodes within one ankle injury and one bad night in Atlanta or against Atlanta. And that feels so crazy to me, man. It's week 2. So it's like you can and talking about the freaking out part, you can very quickly get to a really bad spot with this and then maybe have to remind yourself, well, he might play next week. Like he might get back against the Steelers and look, Justin Fields had a good day against the Steelers and so did Sam Darnold. So it might be fine. And that's kind of the best I could do for you.
Yeah. And I think, when you're obviously, the primary focus for them is the Cincinnati Bengals and finding a way to win this game this weekend. But if you kind of think big picture, again, I go back to all of the moves they made in free agency to bring in these veteran players that are, built to help you right now and contend right now. So the window for those particular players, talking about, guys like Jonathan Allen, even Andrew Van Ginkel, who's, getting to be 30 years old here, I think, or he might be 30 years old already. Javon Hargrave, these are guys that are ready to win right now and playing, kind of in the prime of their careers, or at least kind of towards the end of the prime of their careers. It's likely that 2-3 years from now, those guys aren't going to be on this team. And what does this team look like? Now, you still got your cornerstone players. You still got Jefferson. You got Darisaw. Those are 2, prime, elite level players at positions that you need talent to be elite to contend and win. So that's good. But some of these other ancillary pieces aren't necessarily going to be on this team 2-3 years from now. And if you fast forward to 2027, 2028, and you haven't gotten what you need to get out of JJ McCarthy, now you're probably talking about, even if KOC and Kwesi are still part of this organization, now you're talking about probably having to use another first round pick on a quarterback again and kind of starting this process all over. And what does the roster look like 2-3 years from now? Do you have the cap space? Do you have the flexibility? Do you have enough good players to where you can try this again? Or is it going to be more of a situation where it's going to take a couple of more years to even get yourself back into contention?
And there might be a scenario where they sort of split the difference of what we're talking about here, where McCarthy comes back and Wentz, let's say he just does okay. Let's say he's, 1-1 or 2-1 in these next 3 games. Let's even just make it 2. McCarthy, I think, with a sprained ankle can fly to London. I don't think that's an injury that prevents you from getting up in the air. So let's just say that he gets back against Cleveland in London. Darisaw is back to take on Myles Garrett, and just like off we go. We're back on, and the season is not over because they're 2-2. And then McCarthy the rest of the way is okay. And what I mean is they go 9-8, and he's got some games where you're very excited about him, and they've got some games where you're very unexcited about what he does that look like the last one against Atlanta. And it's a tough schedule, and they miss the playoffs by a quarter of a game, some sort of tiebreaker or something. That is a position where you're a little bit like, how do you feel now? How do you feel now if he settles into just being okay by the end of the season? And then you're looking at the roster and the money you've spent saying, we really can't improve it. It kind of is what it is for this year and next year before some money shakes loose from the tree of the salary cap and YouTube buys more games and Netflix buys more. Netflix is going to buy Flag Day, and next Netflix, actually that's in June, so you can't do that. They're going to buy National Donut Day. We're going to play an NFL game on a Wednesday for National Donut Day, and it's going to be on Netflix. It's like, it's just right. So
Wouldn't put it past them.
The
Would
cap,
not put it past them.
The cap will go up, but next year they're not going to be able to spend a whole heck of a lot. So that I think would leave you in an awkward position as well, of just kind of hoping that he builds on what he's done and what he could be consistently. But even I think a 9-8, and this is where I wanted to transition the discussion into like, what's a success now? And have we shifted our expectations now of this season based on what's happened in these first 2 weeks? Because if he's 9-8, I think you could still go into next year talking yourself into pretty easily, well, that's fine. Like, he'll get there, and that wasn't what it was supposed to be, but it's also not the worst case scenario. So he'll get there next year. I think the toughest is probably like a 7-win season where he's good in 3 games and he's bad in 6 games. And you're like, because then you get into the Sam Darnold, like, remember those 3 games? And I got to say, I was a little, we'll get into this, but I just, as an aside, I was a little concerned this week when Wes Phillips was like, guys, you got to remember, he made that one throw to Naylor. And I was like, it's a pretty routine play, Wes. I mean, come on, it's a good throw, but come on. I mean, this was not Montana to Clark in the back of the end zone here. I mean, it's just like, you got to remember, he took a hitch, and you're like, oh, is that what we're doing? Is that what we're doing? Like, we got to play to our standard, but that one throw that was nice, we're going to like talk about that. I don't know. That was a little bit, because that sounds to me like, you remember the Jets people, you remember those games in the last 3 weeks, he was really good. Like, I don't think you want to be in that spot, but how would you define, Manny, right now, what a successful season is for the Vikings? Is it only Super Bowl? Is there a different definition? How would you put it?
It's a great question, and I think, well, I mean, context is everything, and I think you have to consider, not just how JJ McCarthy has looked in these first 8 quarters of the season, but all of the injuries that they've had to deal with, and it's hard to really predict how these injuries are going to play out with some of these guys. Blake Cashman's on IR; he's going to miss at least 4 games, but what's he going to look like when he comes back? Hamstrings are tricky. Aaron Jones, hamstring. Those are very tricky. How does he perform the rest of the season? I think you just have to take all of that into account. And if they can find a way to finish 9-8, and even if they don't make the playoffs, they're at least in the conversation all the way to the end of the season for a playoff spot. I think, all things considered, knowing what we kind of know about JJ McCarthy now based on the first couple of games, that really overall look like he's probably not ready for this yet. And he can become more ready as he continues to play if he comes back from this injury and he's all right. But I think all of that into account, if they can finish 9-8, maybe just miss the playoffs by, a tie break, losing out on a tiebreaker or something like that, I think you can call that a successful season, provided that JJ McCarthy shows growth, improvement, solid, positive development as they're kind of going towards that 9-8 record.
I think that's a good way to put it, because the caveat of that has to happen with JJ McCarthy playing. And I was just pulling up last year's performances by quarterbacks, and where would he have to say, just for a catch-all metric, where would he have to rank by PFF? Like Darnold was the 12th best quarterback by PFF last year. He's probably not going to reach Sam Darnold level. That would mean really something has happened good for JJ McCarthy just for his overall season, even with the slow start. It's hard to get that, PFF rating that high. But he can't be where Drake May was last year or Caleb Williams either, where those guys were 24th and 25th. He's probably got to be in the Bo Nix range, which was 16th last year. Rodgers was 17th. Love was 18th. We know that Love had a tough season through injury. If he is there, then I think that you can get to 9-8. You can be in the, hey, let's hope for a tiebreaker. And as long as he has played well along the way, that still ends up being somewhat of a success. Now, I went into the season saying, like, this is not a fake trophy season. I'll still stick with that. I will still stick with that. If you get to the end of the year and you miss the playoffs, trust me, there's a rant on the way. That means you have failed. And regardless of whether the moves made sense at the time, they don't give out a trophy that says your moves made sense at the time. They give it out for you winning a championship, and they're supposed to compete for a championship. And I don't want to move that goalpost just based on 2 weeks, because these are the decisions they made. These are coaches and front office people. They got together in a room and they said, should we stick with Sam Darnold? Should we go with Aaron Rodgers? Not that I think that would have taken them anywhere. Darnold, though, should we stick with Darnold? Should we? And they all decided, hey, we're going with JJ McCarthy. So if that fails, it's on every single person, and that will be factored into the pressure of them in the future. But if you get to a point at the end of the season where you're looking at 9-8 and you lose out on a tiebreaker from getting in the playoffs, and McCarthy is the 16th best quarterback by PFF and has had a lot of really good games along the way, and you lose by 8 points to Lamar Jackson, and you lose by 6 points to Jared Goff or something like that, so be it. You get sacked 4 times by Micah Parsons. Okay, then that means to me, you're headed in the right direction, and you're going to take your second swing at, because always been 2 swings in my mind, this year and next year. If you can convince me by the end of the year that JJ McCarthy will take the second swing at it and have a chance, then I think that's still successful. Now, if they get to 9-8, Manny, and Carson Wentz has started those games, that's just not enough. That's not enough for me. That's not doing anything for me.
No, I agree with you 100%. And I think that's where I go back to context being everything here, because to your point, they go 9-8 and Carson Wentz has started most of these games. I mean, Carson Wentz is the veteran that is supposed to kind of, for lack of a better term, have it all together here and be able to sort of, it's supposed to be a situation where if Carson Wentz plays in that game against Atlanta, then you end up winning the game, because a lot of what went wrong offensively was because of the play of the quarterback and just the overall inexperience of JJ McCarthy in that moment. But if you get to 9-8, I mean, Carson Wentz was on an Indianapolis Colts team in 2020 or was it 2021? I think it was 2021, where they had some high expectations and he played all right. He played pretty good that season for them, but they had a no-show performance in the last week of the season on the road in Jacksonville that knocked them out. And then Carson Wentz was on a different team the next year. So that's the kind of thing that's where it's kind of a fine line between like how it looks, how that 9-8 looks when you get to the end of the season, and what has kind of transpired on the road to that 9-8 is going to be a huge deciding factor on how I think a lot of people feel about it.
And that, I think, is why that '08 season sticks out to me. And also the time that I was in Buffalo before I came here. And I think it was 2014 where Kyle Orton showed up and they missed out on the playoffs in the second to last week of the season. And they had benched EJ Manuel. And this wasn't Manuel's first year, but it was kind of a similar deal where as a rookie, he got hurt and he missed a lot of the season in third. And this is, again, how fast this stuff happens. And people who are, you're a fear monger. Like, I've just seen it. Like, I've just seen this happen so fast where he gets in the game as a rookie. He's showing some signs. He gets hurt. He's out for the season. And then, they play Thad Lewis or whatever, a bunch of random quarterbacks. Jeff Toole was one, I think, that popped into a football game. It was crazy. There was one guy, just as a random thing, but because I was in sports radio and you have callers and, there is as wild as you commenters can be sometimes. And there was a guy who was obsessed with Jeff Toole. And when they finally cut Jeff Toole, we did like an homage to the guy who had called in so many times and been like, I don't think they're giving him a chance. So that maybe that's going to be the Max Brosmer person, although I think Brosmer's a better quarterback. The point just being that, he got hurt, EJ, in 2013. 2014, Orton comes in, almost gets him to the playoffs, has some fun moments along the way. But then going into 15, it was like, so what do you do with EJ Manuel? And they had him in a quarterback competition. He lost to Tyrod Taylor, and then the rest is history there. And I guess it eventually leads them to Josh Allen. But the same thing with '08, where it was like, yeah, okay, Gus is in and Gus is winning some games, but like, what good does this do you? Gus is 38. This is not helping you figure out whether Tavares Jackson could be your franchise quarterback or not. But the roster was so good that year that you should be in the playoffs competing against the Philadelphia Eagles. So you can kind of end up getting stuck in the middle when you have the veteran quarterback in some ways. And I'm not saying that this is true because if it goes ideally, then Wentz plays 2 weeks, wins 1 out of 2 or 2 out of 2, and then JJ takes over again, and then we go off from there. But there's a little part of me that thought it might have been better if it's Sam Howell, because there would be nobody in that locker room who went, hey, we got to stay with Wentz, right?
Right. Yeah. Because Sam Howell is, I'd be really nervous if Sam Howell was starting even this week, even against Jake Browning. You kind of think like you want these decisions and these scenarios to play out and make the decision easy for you. But again, they're going to be in a tough spot if Carson Wentz throws for 350 yards a game these next couple of games and he's lighting it up and they win in dominating fashion over these next 2 games, which is possible. Then what do you do? Especially, like I said before, if the scenario plays out where you still decide to go back to McCarthy and he comes in and he plays poorly, because then what do you do? Because now that's probably the worst case scenario there, is if you go back to McCarthy after Wentz has played really well and McCarthy just stinks up the joint because he's just still not ready yet. I think that's the situation that they really have to hope doesn't come about.
Then you end up with quarterback controversy, quarterback carousel. Then if Wentz plays bad in a game, he's getting booed and they're calling for JJ. And this
be ugly. It'd be ugly.
What they really need is McCarthy to come back in and play good. That's just what they need here. And, I've seen people every night, like sky's not falling and that sort of thing. If that happens, then it's not. But if that doesn't happen, then I don't know where you go from here. CJ says it's not about how many wins, it's what the wins represent. That is absolutely true. KFT, I totally disagree that Penix wasn't better the other night. I thought Penix did a great job with that game. So Penix did exactly what you're supposed to do as a young quarterback, and the Atlanta Falcons did exactly what you're supposed to do around a young quarterback. They leaned on the run, ran effectively, and then Penix kept the train on the tracks. Didn't have to be special, didn't make any big mistakes. Got sacked a couple times, but did not fumble the football and just kept his team in the lead all the way to the end. That's some game managing there. I was impressed actually with a few throws that Penix made where he could have tried to be risky and said, you know what? Here's the score of the game. We're in control. We're ahead. I'm not going to take that shot. So I liked his game, but he's also 4 years older. Manny, let's talk about Cincinnati here. We're on to Cincinnati. I feel like this whole situation has ruined the many opportunities to say we're on to Cincinnati this week. But the FanDuel question of the day is Justin Jefferson's over-under for this game is 72.5 yards. How many yards do you think he should end up with if the offense is cooking? Like if Carson Wentz works out, how many yards with the over-under on FanDuel at 72.5, how many yards does he end up if Wentz is on point in this game against the Bengals?
I think he definitely ends up with over 100. I think if this offense is cooking, I think it means Justin Jefferson's getting the ball and Carson Wentz is delivering the ball to him. And I think especially going up against this defense, we know Trey Hendrickson's fantastic and Hill is really good as well. But you know, that secondary, you can pick apart that secondary for Cincinnati. And you know, I think it's in order for this offense to really be successful, it's going to take getting the ball to Justin Jefferson as often as possible. And I think that means, you know, somewhere between 7 and 10 catches and somewhere between 100 and 140 yards. I mean, that to me, I think that's going to get it done.
So Williams got 128. Stephanie's got 100. K-Mac wants 133 and a touchdown. So looking at last year as a little bit of a guidepost here, in some of the games where the offense was cooking, doesn't necessarily have to be over 100. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games over 100 last year, but he had a bunch of games that were almost 100. 81, 85, 92, 81, 81, 99, 92. I think that that's probably the range for me that it has to be, because not only the Jefferson big plays that get mixed in, but also the threat of Jefferson as well, that if he's doing nothing, then the other team does not have, and the quarterback's not finding him, then they don't have to give him the type of respect that they usually do. But if he gets them at least enough times for 6 catches for 85 yards, like he had last year against Green Bay, for example, Detroit, where the offense was pretty good, and at the home game, 7 catches for 81, even that just makes your opponent think about, like, Jefferson's doing enough and being involved. I will still stand with he needs at least 10 targets in this game, at least 10 targets, because this is how it's supposed to work with the offense. And I don't need to hear any of the excuses about how he's double teamed. I mean, this is a guy who was double teamed all last year and had 1,600 yards receiving. So that to me is actually the true tell of JJ McCarthy and how it wasn't working in these first 2 games, is how hard it was to find Justin Jefferson. As we look at the targets, 158 targets last year from Sam Darnold. The year before he was hurt, but he still had almost 100 targets. He had 185 with Kirk Cousins. And sometimes it would feel like Kirk Cousins was ignoring him for the first 2 or 3 quarters. I mean, this needs to be, it's not going to work if you don't have a quarterback getting him the 10 targets. And I think it's symptomatic of where your quarterback was at. Like if you're looking for, when we play the whose fault is it anyway, and we end up with a lot of people's names written on the chalkboard, well, there's only one guy who is supposed to throw the ball to Justin Jefferson a lot who's not doing that. And that is where Carson Wentz, I think you heard, you didn't, you were living your life, but the people who were listening at the very beginning, who absolutely are still listening right now, and I love those people, heard me play Justin Jefferson talking about just how, like, practicing with Carson Wentz, and he sees the coverages and he's not trying to take shots. He's just saying, like, a veteran kind of comes in and throws it where it's supposed to be thrown. And if he does that, 10 balls will go to Justin Jefferson and he'll have a big day.
Yeah. And I think it would be different, Coller, if Justin Jefferson's kind of being taken out of the game because of certain coverages that they're putting on him, and somebody else is benefiting from that. If somebody like TJ Hawkinson or, you know, Jordan Addison, when he's playing, obviously he's still going to be suspended for this game Sunday, but somebody else on the offense is getting a lot of chances to eat because of how they're covering Jefferson. But in these first 2 games, we haven't seen anybody else really emerge either and benefit from Justin Jefferson, quote unquote, not getting the football. So that tells you right there that this offense needs to get it in gear. It starts with Jefferson, but if Jefferson's not going to get his 10 targets, somebody else has got to be getting some of those targets, and they've got to be productive. And when those guys aren't being productive, your offense is a complete mess.
Just to follow up on the Penix point, KFT. Yeah, I know the box score stat line there. He actually was under pressure 40% of his dropbacks. But here, I'll give you the key stat and why I loved Michael Penix's game. Zero turnover-worthy plays for Michael Penix in that game. And if J.J. McCarthy, I promise, I'll hold me to this. If J.J. McCarthy plays a game where the Vikings run for 200 yards, they control the game the entire time with their defense, and J.J. McCarthy has 0 turnover-worthy plays, I will be sitting right here with Emmanuel Hill saying, great game, J.J. McCarthy. I promise you I will. And you probably heard me say it for a game or two for Darnold last year at the beginning of the season. I promise you I will, because that's how you play to win in the NFL. It's not necessarily about stat lines, and I thought he played to win, and that's when you're a young quarterback, that's what you're looking for. Aaron Rodgers probably has 300 yards in that game, but when you're a young quarterback, that's what you're trying to do, and that's what I want to see J.J. McCarthy do, is have 0 turnover-worthy plays, manage a game, but they need a lot of other things to work there. They need the running game. They need to move the offense well enough, and they haven't even put him in a position to play game manager, and he hasn't put himself in a position to play game manager either at any point this season. So let me try to circle back to what the point was. Oh, yeah, Jefferson. 7 to 9 catches, CJ says, for 85 to 105 yards. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yep.
Let's see. I'm just scrolling back up for answers there. 98 to 108 yards. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all on kind of the same page there, that it needs to be fairly consistently working for Justin Jefferson in order for this offense to go somewhere. So that leads me to this question, Manny. This is one of the hardest ones to figure out. I was walking out today with Alec Lewis, of The Athletic, and we're talking about the game and just like, what the heck's going to happen in this football game? I mean, you never really know, but it's like, we can usually get a good sense. And with this one, like, I don't know. I really think that they should win. Here's what I know. And maybe you've got a better, crystal ball for what's going to happen here. What I know is they got to win. There are must-win games at the end of seasons that we talk about a lot. And I think that this pretty much falls in the category of must win, because next week you're facing the Steelers, who are not good, but they're not a joke. And Cleveland is a joke. Okay, that's a free win, but it gets so hard after that. And I don't know, like if their quarterback situation is bad and the other team has Myles Garrett, it might not be a free win. I have no idea. They almost beat Cincinnati. So I know that they need it. I don't have a good feeling on if they'll get it.
Yeah, it's tricky because I'll take it here. Christian Darrisaw's got to play in this game. I think it's imperative for him to play in this game. If he's not ready, obviously you got to think about his long-term future and everything. But I think this is the game that he's got to play, because if they got to trot Justin School or Walter Rouse out there, left tackle, to go up against Trey Hendrickson, it's going to be, I don't care if it's J.J. McCarthy or Carson Wentz or Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady. It's going to be a long afternoon if your left tackle situation is that, and you're going up against that edge rusher who has led the NFL in sacks the last couple of years. So that, to me, is going to be the big key for this. If Christian Darrisaw plays and he's looking like himself, which I have no reason to think that he won't, I think 65% of Christian Darrisaw would be better than the alternative. Then I like their chances of winning this game, because I think that means that the quarterback is going to be protected, and it's going to give Carson Wentz an opportunity to really kind of move this offense. But if he doesn't play, it's going to be a really long day. And I don't know. I mean, Jake Browning he's not Joe Burrow, but he can go out and he's capable of playing well and winning a game, because we've seen him do it for the Bengals already in years past. So that, to me, is going to be the big key, is just getting Darrisaw out there. And I think it'll really help stabilize everything, because I think that's going to have a domino effect on the rest of the offense.
I'll throw this out there for you. Jake Browning, 2.34 seconds average time to throw, quickest in the NFL. It's not a guy that's just some joker back there. Like, he'll get the ball out and he'll get it to his playmakers. I think the biggest factor here, so you named the biggest factor, it's whether Darisaw plays. The second biggest factor is, I'm just going to name some folks in the secondary: Byron Murphy Jr., Theo Jackson, Josh Metellus, Harrison Smith, maybe. Very big maybe on that. Jeff Okudah, Isaiah Rodgers. Here's what they need. I'll throw Eric Wilson into this, or Ivan Pace. 2 picks. I think they need to intercept Jake Browning. He's not accurate, and even though he gets it out quick, he doesn't throw it very hard. Like, they need some game-changing defensive plays, some takeaways to turn this game in the Vikings' favor, or I could see them just hanging on to the ball all day with matriculating passes down the football field on a defense that does have to kind of bend, not break right now until it's got its full breadth of players. And if they also, for the future, if they get run on in this game by Cincinnati, I'm sounding the alarms. I'm getting a big giant alarm, and I'm hammering whatever button makes it go off. If they can't, Bijan Robinson, you don't have the ball all day. I get it. Like, your quarterback keeps throwing interceptions. I get it. But if Chase Brown and this team runs on you, then you got some serious problems.
Chase Brown is averaging I just looked it up. He's averaging 2.4 yards a carry.
Yeah.
If that guy runs for 100 yards on you, then, oh boy, we're in big trouble.
Yes. Dino suggesting put Brandel back at left tackle. I would rather go with Rouse for now. I mean, Rouse is a guy that they've drafted and developed. Brandel has not played any tackle. I would go with, if Darisaw doesn't play, it would be Rouse to start. But then if he's getting worked, then go to Brandel. But the last time Brandel had to play a top-notch edge rusher, remember when Micah Parsons just ate him alive in that Sunday Night Football game where Darisaw got hurt? Wouldn't want that either. There's no good option. I'm sorry to inform you that it's not like a kicker where you're like, maybe there's some other guy kicking at a high school who's fine. And then there is a lot of times. It's not like that. Not like that with left tackle.
I got some breaking news for folks. Trey Hendrickson is a monster.
Oh, I literally thought you had real breaking news. I was like, oh, what happened? I thought maybe you were looking at Twitter or something. And like, you really sold that.
Total sarcasm. Trey Hendrickson is a monster.
Yeah.
They need Christian Darisaw to play in this game.
Yes,
badly.
they do. Giovanni, yes, Josh Oliver was practicing, but only limited. And I think that's a concern for me as well, because that's a guy who's supposed to help your left tackle, but just couldn't be on the field enough. KFT, why haven't the Vikings worked on McCarthy's long windup? So this is what I mean by when I said earlier that we become like the Anchorman thing where you're just like, are you just pointing at things and saying that they're a problem? I don't know if his windup is a problem or not. I mean, I don't think that the way the ball has actually been thrown is a problem. I think it's the decision-making that's the problem. There are lots of quarterbacks who use their body to throw the ball. There's quarterbacks who bring the ball down. I mean, there are other quarterbacks who do it really quick. Drew Brees always brought the ball all the way down and then brought it back up. But Drew Brees threw with anticipation and had a quick mind and quick eyes. He had to kind of throw that way because his shoulder was broke for half of his career. But there's plenty of quarterbacks who throw with their body or whatever. The issue to me is just the decision-making has to be fast. And Wes Phillips said it perfect. He said, if you're going to play quick game and you're going to get the ball out, you got to kind of start throwing the ball before the guy's even in his break, which means you really have to trust it. That is super hard to do. And that's inexperience, I think. So I don't know. I'm not a wind-up technician analyst when it comes to that. I've seen that wind up before. It's not something I've never seen a quarterback do before. You'd prefer that the guy was, 6'5" and only had to do kind of this, or, whatever, just a little short release, or like, Aaron Rodgers with his and how fast that was. You'd prefer that, but he's also 22. I think there's probably some things to work on through the years.
Well, and the windup is not Tim Tebow slow. Like,
right. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's just kind of something that is probably getting a little bit overblown. I mean, if it was Tebow level of like slowness and a windup, then I think, yeah, we probably have a huge problem with that. But I don't think it's that bad.
Well, and Tebow had no velocity. I think what makes up
Right.
for it, and Allen can be this way at times too. And I think he's worked really hard on it, Josh Allen, because his was really long to start his career. But I think that velocity helps you there. So even if it takes a little bit extra on this end, on the end of the ball, and it's how fast it's moving, makes a difference. Kind of like if it's a shortstop, where you might see a shortstop quick, but he doesn't have a big arm, or you might see a little more wind up, but it goes faster, gets there about the same time. I don't think that defenses are sitting there going, yes, his windup is taking so long that we'll just know, like, the game's moving too fast for that. Where I do think that they have taken note is the eyes. And when the eyes are exactly where he's going to stare down a target and then go there, that's something that, because you have lots of players whose technique is eyes on the quarterback and they're reading and reacting. So I would say that's a little bit more concerning. But I also think that he's going to get stronger and work on this for years, and they're going to be working on things. I think actually, if anything, when it comes to the windup, I don't think it's the windup. I think that the stride can get a little long and then it can sail on him. That's what I saw during training camp at times. I feel like he's not a natural touch guy who just can guide the ball with the perfect amount of touch on it. And how can I put this? It's like if I was learning how to be like a what do they call the guys with the bicycles that go, like the dirt bike racers or whatever? If I'm like alone on the track, I could be like, wee, and going over the jumps and I'll be okay. That's way different than the race where there's 10 other dudes flying around you and you're trying to ride that bike. I think that's kind of what practice is with some of this stuff versus playing in the real game. Like, you're alone in the gym making threes. That doesn't mean you make it in the game. The only way to do that is to play so much that you feel like you're alone in the gym and have that level of comfort. So some of those things that you practice time and time and time again. Did I ever tell you about seeing Dwight Howard? How I went to Orlando with a buddy of mine when Dwight Howard was at his absolute peak, and we got there too early. So we got there, it was a 7:30 game. We thought it was 7. So we got there like 6:45. So we're just sitting there eating popcorn and watching Dwight Howard practice his free throws. He was shooting about 40% on the season. We watched him make 20 in a row with his coach. Yeah. Bang, bang, bang. Gets into the game, goes 1 for 5. And it was just like, what happened? It's just different. It's just different. And the only way to get better at it, I'm not saying he's Dwight Howard missing free throws because he was never good at it. It's just to demonstrate like that it's different when you get out there, and you usually sort of regress to who you are. So these are things that he needs to be on the field for. Anyway, let's circle back to the football game with the Bengals. So I think that they win fairly ugly, fairly close. You agree with that?
Yeah, this feels like a game that could be really ugly at times, and not 3-0 like it was in Vegas with the Vikings and Raiders a couple of years ago. But I can kind of see this being kind of ugly and the Vikings winning like a 23-17 type of game where it's ugly at times, but then there's some moments where we see some good quality football.
Warm up your leg in pregame, Will Reichard. You might be needed in this one, is how I'm looking at it. I'll go 17-14. I just think it's going to be some turnovers, some ugliness, some punting. The special team's going to have to be good. So let's do this before we wrap up. It's been a heavy week. We'll be live tomorrow, but it's going to be mostly my conversation with Andrew Kramer with our hardcore position by position breakdown. I'll do at the beginning of the show kind of the injury update, and then we'll go to that, and that'll be the show for tomorrow night. But just to add some fun to this, let's talk about your 5 favorite Bengals of all time. And somebody tossed a Kajana Carter out there. Somebody tossed a Jeremy Hill out there. I would love for the chat to toss in a few more random or your favorite Bengals of all time for Manny's list. And I am still working through getting us some music back. But I'll get that for the future. I'll get us some music to play underneath, some NFL music or something eventually. But for now, your 5 favorite Cincinnati Bengals of all time, Manny.
So let me preface this by saying there are 3 wide receivers in this top 5 here. The Bengals kind of low key, if you think about it, especially now with Chase and Higgins, who they have now, who are both fantastic. The Bengals have a nice little history, low key, of some really good wide receivers over the years, even in seasons where they've been pretty bad. So number 5 on my list is AJ Green. Just terrific, really consistent, especially first half of his career. Some injuries and everything and age kind of caught up to him. But when he was at his best, he was absolutely one of the elite wide receivers in the league. So AJ Green is number 5 on my list.
Big fan of AJ Green. Always wondered if he had a little better of a quarterback. I think actually, if you're making a comparison for Justin Jefferson, like who's the receiver he is most like, just historically, I think AJ Green would be a really good answer. That's just like great athlete, great basketball player, like very natural catching the football, great size. Yeah, big fan of his. Just sort of got saddled with, Andy Dalton for a large part of his career, and probably was the reason Andy Dalton got to play so much.
Number 4 on the list, another really one of the great wide receivers that the Bengals have had is Ocho Cinco, Chad Johnson. Really one of the best, like just in terms of route running and great hands. Really one of the most complete wide receivers that we've had, certainly of his generation and really over the last quarter century. So Chad Johnson, number 4 on my list.
Jerome Simpson, TJ Hushmanzada, David Fulcher, Pete Johnson. Pete Johnson, I don't remember. It's must be quite an old school one there with him. So Chad Johnson, I was always a little bit hot and cold on. I thought he was absolutely hilarious during his career, and I just thought, let him wear the Hall of Fame jacket or eat a hot dog on the side. Like, this is harmless stuff. I get so
close to the cheerleader after a touchdown.
It's harmless. It's entertainment. Remember when Jefferson did the too small after he caught a touchdown against the Panthers and they flagged him for it? You're like, oh, come on. That happens every basketball game in the world. What are we doing here? So I always thought, let him have his fun. And as a receiver, he is unbelievable route runner. But I also thought that he had a little bit of that Stephon Diggs to him, where when it went wrong, it went really wrong, and then it went publicly wrong. And that's where I think people kind of got frustrated with him. And he's kind of a strange guy in post-career. So I think he was during his career. Just a great, great player. Really, really fun. But I thought he had that wide receiver gene in him where if things were not going his way, he was going to let you know about it.
I remember the year, it was one of the early years when Marvin Lewis first became the coach, and they were playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who were coached by Dick Vermeil, and they were like undefeated 9-0 or something like that. And Chad had guaranteed, he told the media like 2 days before the game, we're going to win on Sunday. I guarantee you we're going to win on Sunday. And the Bengals went out and they beat the Chiefs. So number 3 is, and this guy had a nice, decent run, in the mid 90s with the Bengals. The teams were terrible, but I always kind of liked watching him play. Had a really nice arm, is quarterback Jeff Blake. Those Bengals teams in the mid 90s, really bad on defense, but they always seem to have a pretty good offense with a guy that's going to be number 1 on my list, playing with Jeff Blake at that time. But yeah, Jeff Blake was always a guy that I kind of, as a kid especially, gravitated to watching him play with the Bengals.
So Jeff Blake is a guy that I thought in a certain time and place in the NFL would have been really, really good. And I don't know if that time and place is actually right now. I think it was like 5 years ago, from 2015 to 2020, where the play action stuff was crushing it. Deep balls were crushing it. Teams were hunting explosives. You know who'd be a good quarterback for Kevin O'Connell is Jeff Blake. Dude had an absolute freaking cannon. I don't think he was the best at executing the underneath stuff, but when he would let it loose, he would let it loose. And he had that one season, I think it was 95. He's a Pro Bowler. He was really good. The franchise is kind of a disaster. He got another chance with maybe the Saints or something, but kind of flamed out there. Fun quarterback when he played, though. Just a monster arm. So that 95 Bengals team was really fun.
Number 2 on the list is Corey Dillon. Just when he was at his peak as well with the Bengals, he was just one of the great running backs that we've ever seen in the league. And so obviously went on to New England, won a Super Bowl with the Patriots and everything. But I remember, and he was on some bad Bengals teams too. You know, he kind of, when Marvin Lewis got there, they started to kind of contend a little bit more. But Corey Dillon was another one of those guys that suffered through some lean years with Cincinnati, but was still a really productive back.
I think one of the best running backs of all time, borderline Hall of Fame player. I remember the game, listening to it on the radio where he broke the rushing record. The size speed combination was just phenomenal. And it really showed you, though, just how much a running back really means to your wins and losses, because they couldn't get good quarterback play. They had bad quarterbacks going in and out, and just never really worked out for him to be on a great team. Great player, though. He was one of those guys that I always tried to get in Madden, because you could run over people, but he was also 90-something speed. And that was how I used to decide what players I liked back then, was just, hey, can I get this guy on Madden, and how good is he? But Dillon was also another guy that in the fantasy era, in the era of we can watch Red Zone and see every player, he's a player that I feel like I just missed out on seeing enough. Kelvin Johnson is this way for me. Like, what's your favorite Kelvin Johnson memory? So, there's not many of them, because I just didn't see a lot of him with the way that football was, available then, where you're more of reading box scores with Calvin Johnson, be like, this guy must be great, but I've never seen him.
All right. So number one on my list is, he's always going to be my favorite Bengal of all time, and it's Carl Pickens.
Yep.
Carl Pickens in the 90s. He played on those mid-90s teams with Jeff Blake. Big reason why Jeff Blake was so successful for those couple of years with the Bengals. And this is a guy, I'm going to read you his stat lines for 3 straight seasons, 94, 95, 96 for Carl Pickens. 94, 71 catches, 1,127 yards, and 11 touchdowns. 95, 99 catches, 1,234, 17 touchdowns. And 96, 100 catches, 1,180 yards, and 12 touchdowns. He was second team All-Pro in 95 and 96. And mind you, this is with Jerry Rice, Tim Brown, and Chris Carter at the peak of their powers, dominating the NFL. And Carl Pickens was second team All-Pro during that time. Really a really great wide receiver. Didn't have a super long career, but when he was at his best, he was fantastic.
Had he only had some quarterback play and a competent franchise, which is really, when you just look at the history of the Cincinnati Bengals, a lot of players you could say that same thing for. I think they had a lot of fun players in the Andy Dalton era that just got kind of looked over. DeMonte Pico, guys like that. Like, there were a lot of really good players. Carlos Dunlap. You go back a little bit, Geno Atkins, right? You go, Pac-Man Jones was really controversial at the time because he kept having issues with anything regarding a club. But at the same time, it was a fun player, like a great punt returner, great, those eras of Zimmer where he was their defensive coordinator. They were excellent. They had one other edge rusher that everybody always thought was going to come to the Vikings, and I can't remember who that was. But Dunlap was extremely good.
They had Justin Smith for a little bit.
Justin Smith. Yeah. I don't know if he's the one I was thinking of, but Justin Smith was really good. So the Palmer era, Justin Smith was a Palmer era, and they had a lot of fun players too. And I was always a fan of Carson Palmer. And when it worked out for him with Bruce Arians in Arizona, I was very happy for him, because I just thought, this guy, you go to a franchise that's that dysfunctional in that time, where even like now people still talk about Cincinnati as being dysfunctional. They were twice as much in the early 2000s, and just what a bad break in that playoff game versus Pittsburgh, because I always thought this guy could go to the Hall of Fame someday, and then somebody falls on his ankle, and then the next thing you know, he's playing quarterback for the Raiders. But, historically, they've got a ton of great players. Anthony Munoz, maybe the best tackle of all time. James Brooks was a really fun player for them. Boomer Esiason. Steve Weish, their head coach, was the guy who was really innovative in a no-huddle offense that they ran, that up-tempo and the Ickey shuffle. Even though Ickey Woods wasn't like the best player, at least, he was a lot of fun. So, and Chris Collinsworth, who is at the center of my book. Football is a numbers game, if you guys haven't heard about that. So Okay, Manny, what a week it's been. Why don't we take a break and we'll reconvene on Monday and see what we've got on our hands. I mean, it wouldn't be us talking Vikings football if we had any idea where this thing will take us next. So I appreciate your time as always. Look forward to a roundtable on Monday. We're gonna get Murph a table lamp or something so it doesn't look like he's just in his basement. But Manny and I have lights. So we'll work on that. We'll get Murph up to speed, but we'll have a good discussion. And tomorrow night, as I mentioned, it'll be Andrew Kramer and I. We recorded today out at TCO Performance Center. That's more of a hardcore player versus player type of breakdown. So if you're rewatching this, remember to answer the FanDuel question of the day, which is Jefferson's over under 72.5. How many yards should he end up with if the offense has cooked? So another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Thank you, Manny, and football.